Salty Siren says the truth community's out of control. It's not so much that it's that they're truthers, but it's that they're YouTubers. And I'm not a YouTuber. Like this is independent of any of their platforms. YouTube hates me. But on YouTube, you have a closed, you have like this, it's a little ecosystem there. And you have a lot of big fish in this pool. And they just kind of, they want to keep, especially with the truther communities, it's small. So it's a small pool, makes many big fish. And there's always been this kind of contention between channels. I never got with that. I always thought, hey, why aren't we networking? Not for financial reasons, not as business arrangements that I'm saying, why don't we just aggregate all of us who aren't completely hoodwinked, which is what we're doing. Okay, I'm going through some comments. P. Trippa says Italy was also the origin of quarantine for 14 days. Yep. This cyber pandemic is part of the new agenda. It's the next thing. I called this out. This is why you have liberals leaving Twitter to run from right-wing memes. It's a repeat of the safe space. And the safe space was preparing you for social distancing and quarantine. And the quarantine and social distancing is preparing you for the internet becoming a safe space. And I think that's where the cyber pandemic comes in. And remember, Cyber Polygon was an exercise that was being planned for July last year. And on the day that they were going to do Cyber Polygon, because it got canceled, they had major outages throughout Canada. No coincidences. All right, there's so much to talk about right now. A lot of the symbolism right now has to do with the heart, as I've been talking about, as we've been seeing, and it's just been emphasized all over again with Kendrick Lamar winning Best Performance for the Heart Part 5, which ties in with this Black Christ symbolism. And you see here the crown of thorns that he's wearing. And I'm putting together a video of all these figures that embody this and what I think it actually means. Because I think we are, I've been thinking they're going to introduce a new Christ for the new age, a new martyr that will consolidate everyone, all the believers under one faith, and they're all going to agree that this person epitomizes everything that's right with the world or with people, but what's wrong with the world, and he's going to suffer for it, and it's going to be some kind of tragedy. Like I kind of figured that we're going to have someone, perhaps a civil rights type figure, taken out in order to say, hey, look, we've got to do away with right-wing memes altogether. We've got to do away with pro-gun attitudes altogether, globally. Like, that's kind of what I thought. Maybe that's where they're headed, but I don't think there's any one figure that they could kill, like another MLK, for example, or a Malcolm X. I don't think there's any one figure that could catalyze everybody into accepting this. So I'm thinking now that we're seeing a non-stop, I would say just back-to-back train of martyrs, that collectively we're seeing the crucifixion of, not, I'd say we're seeing crucifixion of the poor, of minorities, of victims of this classist system, of the capitalist oppression. The poor can't breathe, the environment can't breathe. And I think that's what we're seeing here. The can't breathe is asphyxiation, which is the crucifixion. Okay, I'm going through your comments. I put all the relevant links. I've been doing a little more review work. I'm writing a review for the rig, which if you haven't seen the rig, I recommend watching it. It's about the Kraken. It's about Earth becoming sentient, fighting against the oil rig workers. But what's even more, it ends with EMP. It ends with a blackout. It ends with a huge flood. And again, George Floyd's name means flood. And I think these things are just symbolic. I think the Kraken, Leviathan, is awakening. And that statue in Manhattan of the goddess with the tentacle arms, yeah, that's what we're seeing here. It's the rising of the Kraken, the Leviathan. It's not some big Godzilla creature from the sea. It's collectivism. It's the hive mind. Here's a link from here, Zero Hedge. Italy's Tim suffers internet connection problems. Wasn't I don't think it's more than 12 or so hours, but it's back on from what I can tell. But I'm just thinking that these things are, the timing of it suggests these things are interrelated. And the first caller brought up that balloon being reminiscent of an egg or the moon. And again, this is the lunar year of the rabbit. You have the lunar rabbit, and China is going to the moon next. You had the lunar shooting at the lunar nightclub, which had a bunch of balloons and space stuff in the background, by the way. And finally, I think the other connection here is they have the jade rabbit. China has a jade rabbit on the moon. So there's some kind of lunar rabbit connections, and these eggs can't be coincidental. But we'll continue to examine this stuff as this story develops. Yeah, Phase Polarizer remarks the rig is on Amazon. One other point about the rig, the main characters in it are from Game of Thrones, and there's a parallel here. They're at the edge of the world, and they're witnessing the fall of the West. The Westeros burns, and you have what looks to be radioactive fallout as dark winter sets in. Winter is coming. The rig ends the same exact way. And it gets even a little deeper, I think, because when the first character in that movie dies, he falls 400 feet, and one of his eyes gets busted, and then he raises from the dead. So you have this man who falls to earth, and like the new man falls to earth, he's black. So you have the black star, and he becomes the savior. He has the one eye symbolism, and he's the savior in that he is resurrected, but now he's one with Gaia, and Gaia speaks through him, and he says, "Hey guys, we need to stop drilling for oil. We need to grow plants." Pretty much. My point is, the whole movie is about revenge against toxic masculinity, revenge against oil workers, and against the exploitation of Gaia. It's basically the same story as Avatar, and the timing of Avatar and the rig and the Davos group is not coincidental. Lean Dion says she burns down Westeros on a dragon. Yes. And in the rig, you'll note that it's a female takes over, a woman takes over, and the men resent it. And not only is she taken over, but her job was to more or less phase it out, shut it down. So we're looking at a repeated theme from Avatar as well. The bad guys were the Marines with their guns who couldn't connect with Gaia because they had buzz cuts and short hair, and they were domesticated and trained and indoctrinated. Then you had the wild ones with the long hair, and they could just plug their hair into the trees and talk to Gaia. And this is the same story that they just played in Atlanta, where they turned that forest area into Pandora. This is this is just very blatant predictive programming. That article, if you haven't read it, it's proposed cop city is Pandora to the eco anarchists. And in this article, which I'm posting below, this is the one protest in Atlanta where the governor sent 1,000 National Guard out. They sent National Guard out. I went to the pictures and the imagery here. They use the big world tree. They point out the long hair, but look at this here. If you remember this article, the riots, there was a cop car burning, and some guy from Fox came out and he says, "It's a mostly peaceful protest." Meanwhile, there's a cop car burning behind him. Well, look what was above the burning cop car. What's interesting is, like, we all know about product placement. Like in school, they teach about how evil marketers are, and they're doing product placement in movies. This is product placement. It's the same thing. Here you have the word Weston right above a burning cop car. And all of their posters for this protest have a tree representing the world tree from Pandora devouring a cop car. And again, the West, think Derek Chauvin, a cop. Nothing epitomizes the oppression of the West more than the police officer. And then you have the martyr in this case is shown reading books to his children. Two different books. Goodnight Moon, there's a moon reference, and Where the Wild Things Are. And Where the Wild Things Are is pretty much the story of Pandora, where in Pandora, this guy goes wild. He goes into their world and he merges with them and he becomes their king. And in this story, in Where the Wild Things Are, the kid puts on his wolf pajamas, he joins the wild things, and he becomes their king. So Where the Wild Things Are, Goodnight Moon, you can connect these to Pandora because Pandora is a jungle moon. Martyred activist associated with these things, the big tree, the cop car below being, this is just, to me it's super obvious that what we're seeing here is, again, and look, they even said this, if they don't protect the forest, if they don't protect the straight pines and the oaks, if they don't protect Atlanta's tree canopy, there will be flooding. Avatar 2 is called The Way of Water, and it's about a water-based race, like Atlanteans. Again, this is in Atlanta. Again, proposed cop city is Pandora to the eco-anarchists. Put a link here in the chat if you want to check that out. Lean Dion says the balloons around the letters lie. Yeah, the Luna shooting, the lunar ballroom shooting, lie. Yeah, totally obvious. Okay, this has been fantastic. We'll be back. So many things to catch up on, but I didn't want to fall too far behind. Tomorrow I'm going to try to really finalize everything with this court thing so I don't have to take any more time off. So one thing I didn't want to happen. You don't want the trolls to win. You don't want to feed the trolls because your most valuable thing isn't your money, it is your time. And you can't make up for lost time. We have 48 to 72 hours of fake news to parse through every day. There's just not a lot of time for trolls. But I'm hoping that this will send the right signal. And if nothing else, this will get YouTube, I believe, to finally respect the copyrights on this channel. And you'll see our YouTube channel at Infinite Plane Society blowing up. And as I said, you want to subscribe to it because I am making it a point to upload a lot of short videos that go into specific topics. And I'll take suggestions. If there's a specific psyop that you want examined, if there's a world stage character or any kind of narrative that you want me to look at, a 10-minute to 15-minute block of time, I'll do it. I have a very fast system. I'm using Canva and my phone as a microphone. It's super easy and it's going to be very effective moving forward. Anyway, thanks for joining. This is Fepe Akbar, Allergic to Bullshit, featuring Lean Dion. I'll go back to the 24/7 after this.
With your deception, keep it real, that's a profession. Like the whole world is pretending, found the truth around the penguin. Get a gang on with a blessing, all the other gang are stressing. RPSC on a nesting, only real ones gonna get this. Fake ones don't accept this, they can miss the message. Timbuktu got bodies, yeah, find them in our wreckage. Auto host a message, squad are representing. Killing you with knowledge, yeah, the uppers getting dirty. Oh, you're so effective, cause we're so effective. Let go of your worries, yeah, the whole thing is a sinner. We got it and we get it, offering refreshment. Level up your conscience, yeah, it's honestly the essence. This wave is uncontainable, facts are undebatable. You lanes are unrelatable, give a fuck about saving you. We could keep on playing you, you just keep complaining too. Game is unescapable, unless you're with the gang or no. Messing with the penguin, we're messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin, 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 fucking with the penguins, yeah, with the penguins. I'm coming with a vengeance, trying to make you come to your senses. Forget the general consensus, just pay attention. The rules are paid for good intentions. I'm clenching, my back wrenching, representing only the most superior.
shit fucking encyclopedia. We're bringing an end to this mass hysteria. They wanna know why it's so serious, cause you must be delirious. If you're still believing stuff, get a grip and show some evidence for your own claims. We don't play no games, we stay relentless, exposing hopes against quick. The IPS are making an entrance, but some doors down, cause now's the time for interventions. Did I mention we're affecting so many men across the spectrum? We stand out from the crowd, we don't blend in. Steady gaining tremendous momentum, there's nothing close to resembling. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like 10 pin, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Gotta know the hopes on me, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs. Messing with the penguin. We're messing with the penguin. You're messing with the penguin. Stop messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin. You're messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin. Quit fucking with the penguins, yeah.
One of the things that I like to analyze with all these events is, yeah, you can analyze what you don't see, the actual victims. You don't see any evidence of real mass casualty, the victims, the crisis actors. You never see tears. I haven't seen a single tear yet. Nobody cried, nobody died at any of these events.
They are shown to be.
Yep, that's an auto hoax.
So what you're saying is you don't accept the claim as missing proof, then you label it.
Exactly, it's an auto hoax.
Wow, sports is scripted by the number.
All right, it's 12/22/22/2, 8:49 p.m. We're going to go ahead and start early, a few minutes early. Sent out text notifications about 10 minutes ago. Newsletters have gone out. I see there's exactly 33 in the video chat, another 20 on audio. I think we can start. Dave Raven Zeros in chat says, do you still have ambitions of sending up a camera drone to document the flat Earth? As I remember, your mission would have had the drone equipped with a 50mm lens instead of wide. That wasn't really my mission. We were involved in the first civilian space program, and that was Mad Mike's mission to space, but that was a human observer, and it was a raccoon. And the point was we wanted a human observer, because you can always just dismiss video. We wanted firsthand, on the presumption that it hasn't been done yet, that the astronauts have all been actronauts. And to my knowledge, that's still the case. The burden of proof has been shifted. We still want evidence they went to the moon. And the best they can do? Petrified wood, passed off as moon rocks. And one of my favorite sound bites on the entire internet is the NPR story about moon rocks, how
We're playing charades where the world has been staged like a play. The play is on the people, either you wake up or succumb to the evil. When you succumb to the evil.
Welcome to the
All right, thank you everyone here for joining. It is Lincoln's birthday, Super Bowl 57, and the UFO invasion is imminent. It is 2/12/2023, 2:25 p.m. Yeah, we're finally live. I know it's been a few days. We've been very busy behind the scenes. WordPress was hacked. There was an attempted hack on Patreon, and I've been really dealing with that. It's been taking a lot of my time and energy, but it's worth it. Even though it's a Super Bowl Sunday, WordPress has emailed me twice, and I'm going to get everything fixed, likely today. Now, there's a lot of things to talk about regarding not just the Super Bowl and the predictive programming around it, but in general, like the sun. A big chunk of the sun is about to land on us. A big chunk of the sun is broken off and has formed a strange crown-like vortex over it. Now, my take on this one is the symbol of the sun is synonymous with this crown. And when you go into their symbolic system, the corona, the crown, Christ, they're all synonymous with the sun when you look at the just the symbolic value of it. And at the same time, I think there might be a different connotation here because it says implications for understanding the sun's atmospheric dynamics above 55 degrees here cannot be overstated. And I'm looking at this, okay, 55 degrees. Interestingly enough, I have been working on a diagram, a news-based mind map of the instances of the number 55 as it's been showing up in the news recently, specifically with regard to the story of the death of Tyree Nichols. After he died, the protest shut down I-55. And then they said, oh, it's the 55th anniversary of MLK's assassination, and they're going to go do his funeral where MLK last spoke, and they're going to walk up to where he walked. And I thought, wait, 55th anniversary, I-55, and they've connected him to MLK. Daughter of MLK was there. They connected it to Rodney King. And again, I'm looking at this as all symbolic. Rodney King, for example, the name King, obviously symbolic, associated with the crown, happened to be hit on the head 33 times. Now, putting this in context, the sun is the crown. The sun is the representation of the king. And having a chunk of the sun falling off is highly suggestive of some kind of a Kennedy-like event, a headshot. Just pointing it out because there's a lot of headshot predictive programming, and the sun today of all days, very, very conspicuous. That could just be the regular, fear the sky, alien invasion has begun. And then last week we had this. Photos show bright green lasers shooting across the night sky above Hawaii. Now, those could be fake or real. I happen to be watching a series on Netflix, which is kind of like, I'd compare it to Hunger Games and Squid Games. A lot of games, and I think that's significant given that today it's the big game. And what the Alice in Borderland presents is a world where people are involved in a game, and a bunch of rich people behind screens, anonymous people, unaccountable people, are basically deep faking people into killing each other, putting them into positions where they're at war with one another, they're fighting over, it's all game. Their lives have become disposable. And in one of the scenes, you see that these lasers come down from the sky and annihilate anyone who tries to avoid the game. Like, you can't escape. And there are scenes where these lasers show up from the sky as walls of like a laser wall to prevent them from leaving a certain area. Now, that can't be a coincidence. If you ask me, that's the correlation between the Borderland, which is a trending show. Alice in Borderland is trending pretty high right now. And then another facet of the show are blimps. Blimps being the bearers of the threat, and a lot of symbolism in these things is directly connecting to this stuff that we're seeing in the sky right now. And they were even saying, who's in control? I'm talking about in Alice in Borderland. Are there aliens? Who's above the people controlling the game? And they're speculating about who's behind these blimps. All these connections are not coincidental. It's not a coincidence that on February the 4th, on 2/4/2022, the movie Moonfall comes out. Then on 2/4, 2023, they shoot that blimp out of the sky, which looked kind of like a moon. It also looked like the Death Star with the Satelloon dangling from it, which incidentally is, I think all satellites are just dangling Satelloons. There's no proof of orbit in my view. But I don't believe CGI. I don't believe artists' renditions of things. I mean, isn't that interesting if you think about it? All of the satellites you've ever seen, if you've ever Googled satellites, you've seen nice drawings, but airbrush, colored pencil, digital art, but you've always seen things that come out of the imagination of an artist. But now with this balloon satellite, which is the size of what, a bus? I mean, that's huge. We can see it in detail because it's much lower. I mean, that should get people thinking. Why would you have your expensive multi-million piece of machinery hurling around the world instead of having it stationary and dangling, recoverable? All right, I'll go through some comments here. Rocco says, I want to say I live on Maui and all of my friends and contacts have never heard of the spiral over it, let alone seen it. Oh, the spiral was from one of SpaceX's fireworks shows, and it's mostly fireworks. It's all theater. You know, it's Hollywood. The movie industry and the outer space program are actually connected in so many ways, and it's because they're blurring fiction and reality. Man didn't go to the moon in 1969. Man became convinced he did, because a small group lied to the rest and pulled them all into a fantasy to make them easy to control, to make them malleable. Okay, we talked about Alice in Borderland, and there's a lot more about that. The chunk of the sun, very significant headshot thing. Significant too that it's Lincoln's birthday. Then there's other connections as well with blimps. There's a movie from 1977 that we were analyzing in 2019 called Black Sunday about a blimp crashing down onto a football stadium. And the significance there, Black Sunday, ties into the Christopher Nolan, who's the Kubrick of our time right now, in which there's a stadium that gets attacked by terrorists, except for Box 322, which is a call out to the Skull and Bones Society, obviously. And today, Sunday, February the 12th, is the 43rd day of the year, and there are 322 days remaining. So this is one of these dates that kind of you could suggest refers to the Skull and Bones Society. Interesting. The other date would be obviously the 322. And of course, that was the date that the Georgia Guidestones magically appeared, lasted for 42 years before they were blown up, and it was a headshot. If you look at the Skull and Bones, and if you look at the Georgia Guidestones, and these are correlated, you know, it was blown up on the 76th birthday of George W. Bush, Skull and Bonesman, on 7/6. But if you look at it from above, because it's comprised of 4 columns and then a capstone. Well, the capstone is the part that was damaged when it was bombed on 7/6. And I said, well, if the capstone represents the skull, then that's some kind of a symbolic headshot. And this is shortly before the guy named Abe, or Abe, was shot, the former PM of Japan, one of Trump's friends. And so just correlating with today, I'm talking about a chunk of the sun falling, that's the head, that's the crown, and it's Lincoln's birthday. And it's a day that might be sacred to the Skull and Bonesmen. I don't know, but it's connected to their cult here, as you can see, as was the date of the headshot on the Georgia Guidestones. And the Georgia Guidestones were an incredible structure, down to just the nuance of it. The total weight of the 4 columns and the capstone, 238,000 pounds, which is the supposed distance in miles to the moon. And the reason why this was significant is during that time, I'm talking about July, first week of July, NASA had launched a, quote, capstone CubeSat to the moon. There you have a capstone going to the moon, and the capstone down below blows up. And the correlation, distance to the moon, weight of the edifice itself. And they never caught the guy in the bicycle who blew it up, by the way. Going through some comments here. Garrett Summer says, could be breaking news during the Super Bowl. Yeah, one thing you can't we can't ignore here is that there was a very significant Super Bowl presentation of I believe it was 1984, where it had like a UFO thing show up. They have been correlating this for some time. And if you think about it, if you were aliens and you wanted to talk to everybody on one day and communicate one message, what day would you pick? Well, they have all these different religions, and so the normal holidays won't work. What unites everybody more than football? Ball worship. And it's all about this game again, and the game masters revealing themselves perhaps, which is sort of hinted at in this Alice in Borderland. By the way, this was presented by someone on our Discord server, shared this link. JL26 pointed it out. Agent Elvis is a new show coming up on Netflix. This may not tie into anything necessarily, but he goes to this underground base, becomes an agent, and there's a big space needle in the background. It all builds off of this relationship that he had with Richard Nixon. If you recall, Elvis Presley went over to Richard Nixon and gave Richard Nixon a Colt 45. I mean, I can't imagine Ye or any musician or celebrity giving a president a weapon like that, but he did, and he got a bunch of badges: police, FBI, DIA, or what DEA. He was claiming that he wanted to fight crime and that he knew communists were brainwashing people, and so there's this kind of story that Elvis wanted to go underground. Again, if you look at that Colt 45, and he goes underground to fight the deep state. Some QAnoners actually think that Elvis, it's just so ridiculous. Almost don't want to go there right now. You thought Elvis sightings were bad and JFK Jr. sightings were bad. It gets even more twisted. Let's stick with the Super Bowl for the moment here. Inside huge Super Bowl security operation, including aircrafts and thousands of officers after Chinese spy balloon fears. Okay, here you have spy balloon fears, Super Bowl, and this correlates to Black Sunday. Let's see, China wants to dominate near space. This is a new phrase, and this was shared by Linda Curtis in our Discord server. One reason to join the Patreon Infinite Playing Society is you get access to a lot of really cutting-edge research, and we have a lot of people doing a lot of research, and it all ends up there. It all funnels to this one place where we know what outer space is and deep space. Well, now they're introducing near space. And it's just another one of these things, inner space, cyberspace, but it's always about controlling your mind. And I think that's ultimately it. Like they're shrinking down our worlds until we are in a Truman Show. Remember the safe spaces. And the safe spaces became socially, or rather state mandated safe spaces, which they called social distancing. And then of course limiting how many people could be in a car, etc. And now they're going to the point where they're ready to quarantine the internet. Now let me play a clip here. The Philadelphia Eagles debut their black helmets and black jersey. A couple of things I pointed out the other day, because we were talking about a lot of these celebrities, like LeBron James beating this 38-year record in all these ways that just aligned with the number 38, that are just suggestive of some kind of predictive programming or some kind of, I'll say, scripting of how he broke that record. Well, Beyonce was at Super Bowl 47 when it blacked out for 33 minutes, if you recall. The 33-minute blackout period during the Super Bowl 47. Well, just the other day, she won her 33rd Grammy. And I think it's significant that in 2020, she released Black is King, based on Lion King, based on Macbeth. All this stuff is very well, interestingly and intricately connected. I'm just pointing out it's notable that Beyonce's on the world stage getting her 33rd award when she presided over the Blackout Bowl. Again, the Blackout Bowl ties in, I think, to this Black Sunday, along with many other things. And when we say black here, black and white, in a lot of these contexts, it has a deeper occult meaning behind race. That's just the surface. It's all alchemical, as most of you here already know, far beyond blue pill politics. But let me play this. So when the Philadelphia Eagles debut their black helmets, black jersey, and I believe this is the first Super Bowl where both quarterbacks are black as well, obviously scripted.
Car 4133, 4133, you seen this?
Danger high voltage. So here we are looking at the Philadelphia Eagles black helmet, black jersey combo, and this was released 2 months ago. And it starts off with EMP, which is one of the reoccurring themes that we've been seeing again and again, all of it connected with this Kraken, which has been force memed into the mass consciousness since July of 2020.
Captain, what are you talking about? It appears to be a blackout. Everything is all black.
A blackout? Everything is all black? Again, these words have double meanings, triple meanings. Okay, there you have it. And this is just a couple months old, typical predictive programming, and it connects with everything else that we've been seeing. Like, there's definitely a message that's been conveyed, and it's being conveyed, and it has to do with this particular Super Bowl. Let's continue through the notes here. By the way, this is one of my new Metascript mind maps turned into a meme. Elon Musk had tweeted this the other day. Some of the smartest people I know actively believe the press. Amazing. To which I responded, I only believe the news about space travel. I mean, it's just so, everything that comes out of Elon Musk is automatically ironic. You know, he looks at Sam Smith in this devil costume dancing and he says something like, these are the end times. And I'm like, you're wearing the Devil's Avenger costume that you bought on Halloween. It's got upside down crosses on it, a ram's head. And you bought it at a store called Abracadabra, which has hidden significance to the cult of Crowley. Like, everything about Musk radiates Antichrist. You know, he has that vibe, and yet here he is, you know, playing church lady. And then here he is here. I can't believe people believe the news. But you're the guy that put a CGI mouse on a rocket during a mission where they were sending mice to the space station. Mice that were deemed mighty mice because they were genetically modified. He's so deep in the clown show, but he gets away with anything because the public lets him. Okay, we were looking at predictive programming, creepy commercials, and I have some notes here that will probably speed this up a little. We have discussed Super Bowl 47 and the Blackout Bowl. Now, something else too. The fact that Super Bowl 47 was the Blackout Bowl obviously must have some significance, and the number 47 is very well represented in all of this predictive programming. And it all, again, connects to, it's almost cliche, it's almost just, you can predict it. Like, I can tell you, for example, SpaceX prepared for a massive test this week, and they fired, and these are all code words, they fired how many engines at once? How many engines are in this Starship? Just put your answer in the chat below. Little pop quiz for the listeners in the video channels. How many engines were on the Starship that they just fired up? Waiting for an answer here. Harmon says, Tim, I'm leery of this one Super Bowl. It's reminding me of the movie from 1976. 2-minute warning. Right, and look, that one balloon isn't the only one, as we'll get into. There are more. Commenter says Musk is synthetic. Well, Musk was actually invented by Werner von Braun and Walt Disney. In that whole book, you know, the Mars A Technical Tale. Yeah, he's a construct. I mean, there's a guy there playing the role. Maybe he moves a little animatronically. And I have seen an animatronic Elon Musk face that was so, it was even realer than him. And you know what's, this might be a coincidence, but there was a point where I was listening to Grimes, you know, one of his babies, one of his 3D printed baby's mamas. I don't know what, they named their kids after Google Chrome suggested passwords. They're unpronounceable. But this thing with Grimes is interesting because she was talking about how AI could perfect communism, get rid of all systemic corruption, and we could all just make NFTs all day and not have to work. And it was this interesting notion of, you know, the Marxist workers' paradise that could be enabled if you could get rid of the people that always screw up communism, that they could fix communism with AI. And this is all before this James Cameron and Gaia and this new synthesis of everybody, I think, is gravitating towards now. This idea of this universal hive mind that we're all going to be plugged into. But right after she said that, I was noting her facial expressions, micro expressions, and I thought, everything about her radiates musk. And could she be a deep fake? Like Schmeagol is that the name of the guy? The Gollum? In Lord of the Rings, the little guy is actually an actor who wears that costume. And then, of course, on the computer monitor, he appears to be this little Gollum. And I thought, could Grimes be a Gollum of Musk? And the day I said that, Grimes moved out and disappeared and left with, what was it, that secret agent? What was that one? Agent Manning? Or Soldier Manning, who was some kind of a spy. Anyway, a convoluted story. And it gets weird all the way back. You look at his dad, and his dad's like marrying his adopted daughter, who's 33, and he's 42 years older than her, always with the number 42. Oh, by the way, yes, if you answered in the chat, let's see who got it. No, it's not 42. 42 they did have in one of their rockets. This one was actually 33. Guessed correctly by Cubstar, Frank Mir, Salty Siren, Jennifer Lovecraft Reeves. And just for future reference, for those of you who got it wrong, if we ever have a pop quiz, the answer is always 33. That's just a hint. How many bullets did Frank James fire into the subway? The Prophet of Doom, mimicking the Riddler right off the Batman movie. Anybody? And by the way, he is now friends with R. Kelly in prison. And this is an interesting twist. Frank James, the guy who shot how many bullets into the subway? He's friends with R. Kelly in jail. And I'm like, that's interesting. Because I have someone who messages me about this, and I'm going to find that email, where he was suggesting that Frank James might be some kind of a bodysuit worn by DMX. And this somehow explains the connection between this subway shooter and R. Kelly. But yeah, it was 33 rounds. Okay, let's continue here. Talking about this number 33 and Elon Musk being a construct, Grimes being his Gollum. Here we go. Space travel is a Masonic occult mystery school allegory of ascending to higher states of consciousness. This is why you shouldn't believe them when they say there are aliens from some distant place. It's all a false model, but people will believe it. But the translation is this. When this headline says, SpaceX prepares for a massive test firing all 33 engines at once, the translation, space is higher states of consciousness. Heaven, this is just, again, it's Masonic allegory. Space sex and the Kundalini fire. That's what the firing of the engines references. It's the fire snake igniting the 33 segments of the spine to take us to heaven or space. Even the T-minus countdown 10 to 1, I think it connects the Kabbalistic tree of life, which ties into the rising of the fire snake, often represented with the snake climbing the tree, and these Sephiroth, or these spheres on the tree of life, which have correspondences with the chakra, also correspond to the planets and the sun. And this idea of ascending to higher states is what I think they're actually about. They're not literally taking you to a higher place. It's fake space travel, and it's all Baal worship. And Baal, of course, is where you get the word obelisk. It's the shaft of Baal. It's obelisk. It's his name. It means Lord. And then here you can see on the graphic I put an individual with an explanation of going from the root or the kingdom to the crown. And even here you can see the crown chakra associated with the head. And this is why the halo behind the saints or behind Christ, it all pertains to this. That's why Christ died at 33. It's all a reference to the transcendence of having all 33 engines fired at once. Musk knows this. They all know it. Okay, continuing here. Just had to point this out. This is just kind of a random note. I've been following a blogger, Jim Stewartson, who's been covering QAnon for a long time. And Q's kind of gone now. And one of the things I pointed out, as I did with the space program, I'm pointing out how the space program is the pageantry of Mystery Babylon dressed up like science fiction. And I pointed out that QAnon was the template used for the Quran radicals, that they were creating a domestic Al-Qaeda. And it turns out, I think I'm right. General Flynn, of course, is the one who was behind the Al-Qaeda PSYOP, and he's behind the QAnon PSYOP. He had a central role in both. And just pointing it out here, Jim Stewartson said, quote, "The radicalization process. QAnon was modeled on Al-Qaeda and ISIS." Mike Flynn admired them. Mike Flynn is a huge name in QAnon. Just pointing this out, I've been vindicated. There are templates at play here. Nothing here is really new. And check this out. This is from the show 3%. In the show 3%, and if it's on Netflix, you can just assume it starts post-apocalypse, post-global warming. And in this one, there are two societies, the poor and the wealthy elite. And you don't get a go to where the elite are unless you get, guess what? Exactly, the vax. And as you can see, everyone has a star cut out of their sleeve on their arm to show their vax status. And I used to say that that's all virtue signaling, and people get tattoos, like the Pfizer tattoo. And I think it's just, what, a 666 and a needle? And they put these things on their foreheads or what, their arms, like, look at me, I'm vaxxed. But this is virtue signaling, but this is showing that you're part of the elite club. You're a new pureblood. They consider themselves to be, well, purified blood, and then you're dirty blood if you're not vaxxed. On the other side, of course, the vaxxed will say that they're pure blood, and that the vaxxed are now the goo bloods. It's, kettle and pot and all that. It's just another status symbol. But instead of a badge that can come on and off, instead of a crown that can fall off your head, no, this is actually a deeper, it's almost like a tattoo, like a gang tat. And that's how they're flashing it. It's your gang tat. You're in the Vax gang. The show's called 3%, very similar to Ellis in Borderland, very similar to Hunger Games. And Hunger Games is the subject of that first video that I was going through, called Hunger Games Economic Collapse 2023, World as a Stage. And it is a great collection of, in fact, let me go through one of the clips on this one. At the 5-minute mark, here we go. This is the part where it correlates Lady Gaga with the person who presides over the Hunger Games. But I want to just really quick point out the symbol of the Mockingjay, because there's something in this that we have to point out, because it pertains to now and the Super Bowl and the idea of a broken arrow nuclear threat.
Stuff is all scripted. They're literally leaving breadcrumbs for us that we may gain the understanding of what's really going on. So let's start off with Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is wearing the Mockingjay from the Hunger Games movie, and she's singing the national anthem.
Okay, now the Hunger Games has this, of course, Mockingjay holding an arrow in its mouth, and that is just a stylized phoenix, which is something I've spoken of quite a bit here. It's another reset symbol, burn down, build back better. It's the same symbol as the dove with the olive branch after the flood. Flooded out, build back, it's the same story. The arcs, space arcs, it's all repetitive symbolism. And the Mockingjay has become a phoenix in this context, but he's holding an arrow. And the arrow has been a very significant symbol for the last 6 months, 7 months, ever since Artemis mission had a cracked tank and they couldn't launch. And there was a lot of these references to Princess Diana. And Diana is the Roman version of the Greek Artemis. These are archers. And this recurring theme of an arrow was brought up. A lot of goddess symbolism. If you remember Eliza Fletcher being kidnapped, of course Fletcher, someone who makes arrows. Princess Diana crashes into the 13th pole, cracked pillar like the cracked rocket. Of course 13's the number of lunar months, significant to the goddesses. And the broken arrow, though, was one of the symbols that kept on coming up again and again. And the reason why this stood out to me is this was around a lot of the hype about how we're all going to get nuked, that Putin's going to drop a nuke on us. They were calling it Satan 2. Well, broken arrow happens to be a military term for an accident that involves nuclear weapons or nuclear components. And this has been reported, or there have been 32 broken arrow incidents to date. And I'm saying we're waiting on the 33rd broken arrow. And again, 33-minute blackout bowl, 33 minutes of darkness, and now the arrow with the Hunger Games. And again, games are an intrinsic part of this bigger story, specifically with today in the Super Bowl. So let me go ahead and continue for a moment here.
Economic collapse. They know once this economy collapses, y'all are gonna go wild like it's the Hunger Games and do everything it takes to survive. So when is this economic collapse coming? 2023. Don't think your boy Sleepy Joe is innocent. If Lady Gaga is...
Anyway, 2023, and there's some interesting connections to the Weekend video And The Weeknd, if you remember, right before the lockdowns, he released that video Blinding Lights, the one that all the nurses danced to in the hallways. And that video was The Weeknd running around in Las Vegas like it was already locked down, pre-lockdown. And that was very significant for a few reasons. That song, how long it was on the charts, its release date. There's a lot about Blinding Lights. But his other song, Save Your Tears, has a Kubrick-inspired video mixed with The Purge. And it seems to have connections to some Jordan Peele movies, and it all seems to suggest that 2023 is The Purge. So don't cry in 2020 when you're locked down with your Netflix and your popcorn. Save your tears for 2023. A few more notes here about the Hunger Games.
Some of y'all already saying, well, then that means there's gonna be a civil war. No shit. The Hunger Games catching fire synchronizes with America will have a civil war in 2025, because that's the next step to getting their new world order.
Now, this is an interesting video. Again, I put a link below, and I'm going to continue to share a lot of these new channels that I'm coming across that are compiling predictive programming. There's some really cutting edge stuff here, and that's another reason to join the Discord server. I have a short clip here of the balloon being taken down, and this is a short clip that juxtaposes the balloon being shot down with the Truman Show satellite falling. And this is, of course, people who are aware of how space is fake. It doesn't matter what you think about the shape of the world or whatever you believe. You might believe we're in a CGI ball. It doesn't matter that much at this moment. I think what matters is, of course, it's about who controls your worldview. But I'm not convinced that there are orbiting satellites. I think they're always balloons. Or satelloons. That satelloons can do the same function, if not ground-based technology. But anyway, here we have an example of how it would be feasible to do satellites with balloons. And that's one of the main takeaways from this balloon incident, is that it's entirely possible that they could fake space. But let me play this clip here. Again, if you're just listening, if you're not watching, that's Jim Carrey responding to a satellite that fell from the sky. On it, it says Canis Majoris, which is the dog star. And here he is standing between the Masonic pillars. He's the initiate, and you can find the dog star between the pillars. It's a key, like everybody worships it. If you've ever been to a New Year's gathering and you counted down, synchronized at midnight, what were you counting down? The fall of Sirius. It reaches its highest point at midnight on New Year's Eve. And it's the star that the initiatory societies are all based around. And even 9/11, the Coptic calendar or the Egyptian calendar, the heliacal rising of Sirius. Sirius figures prominently in all these New Year's rituals. Like, this is why I pointed out, it's just whether you know it or not, you're taking part in these things. And that's what kind of got to me about the Truman Show as I watched it, because I had just read a couple of books, I think by Robert Temple, The Serious Mystery, Robert Anton Wilson, The Cosmic Trigger. I watched it and I caught on to the symbolism the first time through, and I thought this is kind of interesting, considering that only a small percentage of the audience members would have a clue. Who are they making these movies for? And this is when I really started taking a deeper look into movies. It was the Truman Show that made me realize that these actors are carrying roles across multiple movies and their world stage personas. All of it tied into this cryptic symbolism. Anyway, there's the link, and I'm going to go ahead and put the link to this video in the chat below. And by the way, Matt Pizzagates grew up in the Truman Show house, the house that Truman Burbank was in. Okay, we're getting back, catching up. Earthquake Projector. This was one of the Illuminati cards at play recently. I think there are 33,000. When it comes to big events, you have to ask yourself, how fakeable are things on scale? And when it comes to media skepticism, you're not obligated to believe anything. You're just not. But if you're going to say something's not true, you have to have something to counter the consensus. And if the consensus is just based on movie clips, or rather, I'm sorry, news clips, then you may have something. But these things are, of course, I mean, there's a methodology. I don't just automatically call everything fake. Now, as far as fakeability, yeah, of course it's fakeable. What isn't fakeable these days? And we'll continue to look at this one, but look at this. This is from Spirit Jordak. Two teams scored 546 points. I was thinking this could mean... Oh, I see. The Super Bowl starts at 6 p.m. We have a lot of people making some very interesting correlations between the timing of this. The main one, of course, being, I think, Lincoln's birthday. All right, commenter says, notice how they ran with that BS foot soreness excuse to keep LeBron James at 38 points. It's sad how scripted sports have become. Yeah, I've noticed recently on Twitter, and maybe you have as well, that the so-called normies out there are noticing how fake stuff is. This DeMar Hamlin event was too scripted to be believed. A guy named Neil with a 33 on his back standing up and everybody kneels, and all of the references to the heart I'm piling up as well, by the way. Like at the Grammys, you had Kendrick Lamar, who wears the crown of thorns. He won an award for a song, I think it was called Heart Part 5. And then Kevin Hart was on some commercial a minute ago for the Super Bowl. It's getting to be pretty blatant. Everybody's noticing. Now look at this one. This was from Not Sure on Twitter. He said, from the 2013 film Oblivion, and 2013 was the year of the Blackout Bowl, by the way, in which the character played by Tom Cruise is in a football stadium that looks like it's been destroyed by a nuke. Oblivion's a pretty decent movie. Now, I don't believe in fake space, but I find science fiction very entertaining. I just don't think these scenes are plausible. And the people who believe in outer space are the least skeptical as far as critics go. Like, they never complain that in none of these movies do they accurately depict people floating around in ships. It's like the ships automatically have gravity. Okay, here's Tom Cruise walking through a nuked out stadium.
Start repairs. Watch my back.
Always do.
There's a goalpost right there, which is tipped over. I would say that's a pretty fair example of what we're seeing here. And all these characters are it's a pretty small group. Tom Cruise is very prominently represented within the whole PSYOP entertainment complex, often represented as this Gnostic Christ. That's why you have all these 33s around him. He divorces his wives at 33, coincidentally. He works with Stanley Kubrick, obviously an insider to the fakeness of space. He's about to go to the ISS. But beyond that, Top Gun 2 is one of the most obviously encrypted movies, just loaded with sun god resurrection symbolism. I have an article about it on timosman.blog if you search Tom Cruise. And I'll reprise a lot of these things. And by the way, if you go to Amazon and you get the book, The Schism and Everything, I put all of my blogs from 2022, all of my movie reviews, all in one book. And I cleaned it up, put it through the editor, went through every article, got rid of stuff that wasn't relevant, and it has all of my reviews in there. You can find my books on Amazon. Okay, continuing. Alice in Borderland, lasers, again, these things are always correlating. I call it concurrent programming. I mean, you have predictive programming when it's months or years in advance, or decades, or generations, as with the alien invasion. Think about that. They've been preparing us for an alien invasion since War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells. But then you have concurrent programming, the stuff that happens real time. Like, oh, you didn't catch the news tonight where there was another school shooting, but if you watch Netflix, you'll, see a bunch of dead kids. And they'll warn you on the screen, oh, before you watch this might remind you of what just happened in Uvalde. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
Plain
Now, this is a short clip from the ISS. I have a few things to say about the ISS, but uh, I want to deal with this first. This is just a short clip. It's fake, first of all, but there is some symbolic import to it that we have to evaluate. But there's gravity up there, at least little pockets.
And what you see here is the two people on the left holding the paper. They're about to drop it when there's supposed to be no gravity. They're supposed to be floating, but they timed it wrong, and then they cut away the scene.
Yep, they cut to the next scene immediately after, but if you're just listening, what happened is the astronauts are handing each other props as always, and they used a real piece of paper, not a CGI one or an augmented virtual reality prop like they generally use, like the microphone cords that go through hands. Like, and look, if you don't know about this and you think the thing's real, your argument is from a place of abysmal ignorance. These special effects are terrible. Anyway, they dropped the piece of paper and it fell. Just like on Earth Day, funnily enough, they had an inflatable globe, which they should have filled it with helium, because the globe fell. This was on Earth Day. They're passing around a globe, or Gaia, the ball Earth god, and they literally drop it on the floor. And they all jump towards it, but they can't because they're harnessed in. They're leashed. These people are on leashes. They're puppets.
Holding the paper, they're about to drop it.
Yep, they dropped it a long time ago. And the cosmonauts dropping screws in the restrooms, it's an embarrassment. It's Mystery Science Theater 3000. Like, if you're not at the point where you're throwing popcorn at the space station, you're missing out on a really good show. Okay, again, I want to point this out. Today, piece of the sun breaks off, stuns scientists. Unusual activity occurs at the sun's 55th degree latitude. Happens every 11 years. Now that's interesting. 11-year solar cycle. I'm not too huge into numerology, but I point out these patterns. I've been trying to figure out this LeBron James 38 thing. And if there's an 11 in there if you add them, and you can. I don't care to do too much to connect dots. I look just for the straight relationships here that don't have any kind of ambiguity. Let me play a short clip here of a blimp crashing into the Super Bowl, 1977. Their special effects are better than what they have on the ISS. Just gotta wait for these commercials that YouTube sends me are also. It's almost like concurrent programming. It's almost like we're already Neuralinked with how accurate they are as well. Okay, here you have a clip from Black Sunday, and you have the depiction of course, a blimp with a bomb on it falling down into the stadium. Now, there's some symbolism in the blimp itself, the symbol of Mercury on it. I think Mercury correlates, in some ways, I would say, with even the Joker character, the mercurial trickster. But he's not able to get his big lighter to light. I hate it when that happens. Oh no, he did light it. It took like 5 tries. I thought he was going to run out of flint. Now, the whole point of this movie, it's Black September, terror attack in a stadium, and the president is there. That's another part of it here. There's another element. The numerology is in this. I'm not going to go too deep into that movie right now, but the main thing I wanted to point out, it came out in 1977. And 1977 was the year of the historic blackouts on 42nd Street in Manhattan. That the Son of Sam was a part of that news cycle. Everyone is in the dark. There was chaos, looting, riots, and then you got this shooter running around. 77. 42 years later to the day on 7/13/2019, blackouts happened. Same place, 42nd Street on, 42,000 people in the dark. And it was literally to the day, and they called it out. And I'm just saying, there's a lot of connection between the number 42 and blackouts. And the more I map this out, the more I realize, okay, not only is there a big script and predictive programming going back, but it's very precise. Again, Goodyear, which is a tire thing. And, the name Tyree, like Tyree Nichols, who's been correlated with MLK, whose 55th, anniversary it is right now. He's 55 years ago he was killed. Well, this Tyree Nichols, the name Tyree, Tyre, is how they spelled, tire in the UK, isn't it? Not sure necessarily, except that you're looking at events that are meant to spark revolutions, or spark, like George Floyd was a spark. It sparked the movement. You have the guy trying to light the thing. I think that's probably symbolic, because I look at the, again, symbol of Mercury, and he's the torchbearer. And that's where Joker comes into the picture, the one who starts the fire. LeBron James hosts 2 goats at a dinner party. Of course, GOAT just means greatest of all time, but I'm only bringing this up because Sam Smith was wearing goat horns. In CBS, they were worshiping Satan for the world there. And then LeBron James comes out with this highly scripted event, everything tied to the numbers, the number 38. He's got the 66 on his chest, but then he bows before, and it's like, wait, he's bowing down. I see the 6 on his back, and then everyone rushes out and they praise him for it. And I'm like, what are we looking at here? It's like some kind of idolatry. It can't be just a basketball game with a bunch of coincidences. Again, as Elon Musk said, some of the smartest people I know actively believe the press. Some of the smartest people I know believe the sports aren't scripted. Doesn't mean that they're not athletic. It doesn't mean they're not actually playing a game. It just means there is a point where real becomes fake. And I have a theory about how this works. Like, there's a lot of people in media get offended. I offended one person. She was interviewing me. She said, "Are you calling me? Are you saying that I'm fake news because I'm in the media?" And I'm like, "Well, no. I think there are levels here, and the higher up you go the pyramid, the more in the know you are. The lower you are, the more ignorant you are. Outside the temple are in the wilderness of darkness. They're not in the know. They don't have the light. The initiates do. But that the higher up you go, the more in the know. You have knowers at the top, believers at the bottom. I'm not a believer. Believers are going off of what the knowers are telling them. 2 different versions, left or right, Republican, Democrat. The fact is, the ones behind the scenes are the ones who know what's really going on. And until you can step off the world stage, you will always be a believer. You'll be lower on the pyramid. And most people in sports, most of the players are probably at the lower levels. Yeah, they sign their non-disclosure agreements, but they're not all at the level of knowing the intricate details. Although, the more I look at the NFL thing, the more it looks like at some point it does become some kind of quasi-Masonic cult. And it's very culty. I mean, it's extremely culty. If you really look at it like from an anthropologist's point of view, like let's say you're an alien anthropologist or an off-world stage observer. You look at basic training. Okay, shave their heads, make them march in step, make them chant, make them tired over. Okay, brainwashing. And that's kind of what you see with these leagues. I think there's a lot of brainwashing involved here. Going through some comments. Rocco says, NWO trying to provoke an uprising, but most of the sheep are just sheep. Yeah, that's been my experience. Like, for example, 2020, we had police precincts burning, we had Chazistan festering, and the police stood down. It was like, wait, what's going on here? Maybe it's all just overly hyped and these are all actors. Like, nobody really gets involved. We're just too busy watching on YouTube. And I think if you follow the money, you'll find that a lot of the protesters and rioters are bussed in from out of town. Like, look at Kyle. Now, I think that whole event, by the way, Kenosha, staged. I think the whole thing was a big stage, kind of like maybe in a... okay, Kenosha's real, but there's a point where the mob is real, the protests are real. But there's a point where they insert something fake, like 9/11. You've got a demolition going on, but the people in the news, they're seeing a version of it that involves planes. The people there, they don't. That's because there are 2 different realities. There's reality, and there's the world stage. Most people live in the world stage, meaning their perceptions are filtered through the screen, which they falsely perceive to be a window to the world, when in fact it's a filter, it's a distorter. It gives you a version of things that they want you to see that's highly curated. The screen is the monolith of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. 2 into 1, referring to the eclipse that you see in the film. The corona. The sun and the moon, Sun is your consciousness. Your subconscious is the moon. And the two into one, this is the alchemy of it. It means the merging of the two. And the way I think the symbolism in 2001 Space Odyssey and 9/11, the symbolism of the two towers becoming one, what they're showing you is how they're merging us with the screen. They're merging us with this televised version of things. So we're no longer in reality 100%. Like, it's here, it's real, but there's the interpretation. The map is not the territory. Let me play this clip here. This is from FakeOTube. These are 9/11 witnesses, just because we're on the topic. And this one here, you may not have heard this one. He's talking about how he saw 33 people jump out. I should have pop quizzed that. How many people did this crisis actor see jump out of the towers?
I counted like at least 33 people dropping from just this side of the building. I counted like at least 33 people dropping from just this side of the building.
Yep, 33 people. Okay, continuing. This is from Norcom. I've been following a lot of these blogs and these news articles, and UFO Twitter is just lit right now. Like, listen to this quote: "I'm in direct contact with Norcom and monitoring the issue. Airspace is closed due to an object that could interfere with commercial traffic. The DoD will resume efforts and observe the object in the morning." They've kept this hype up all night. It's like they're activating everybody to be prepared for something. Here's a clip from the Olympic Games, Los Angeles, 1984, closing ceremony spaceship. 1984. Yeah, this is multi-generational predictive programming. And for some reason, it seems especially plausible right now. Now, I didn't know they were going to do that. That's the opening track to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, Space Odyssey, Journey Through Space, I think ultimately what that means is that we're being merged into, it's control of our mind space. Like, NASA doesn't take us to space, but they're not just faking movies and lying about climate change. NASA's real objective is total world view warfare.
Där nere på plan måste det vara en underbar syn att skåda.
There's a UFO descending.
Nu kommer ett rymdskepp snart, sägs det. Och en helikopter. En helikopter, ja. Och ett rymdskepp.
Okay, it's a very convincing UFO being dangled from a helicopter, I believe. And it descends. I don't know does Michael Jackson come out of this one? I haven't really watched the whole thing. We'll move on from there. But yes, people are ready for anything right now. The Overton window has been smashed, broken, irreparable. This is a link posted in Discord by Lean Dion. More blue people characters that come from the water in Black Panther 2. Also wearing face masks. Not a coincidence. Fascinating. I've done a number of reviews about the movie Avatar and how the new movie Avatar is literally the blue marble for this generation. They have to repeat these things, repeat these themes. And the environmentalist movement was kicked off when the environmentalists saw Gaia in space in need of protection, like an egg that needs to be nested, that we need to cradle it and shelter it. What they've done with Avatar 2 is they've created a deep empathetic bond with Mother Gaia. And it gets intricate because this is an example of concurrent programming in Atlanta. And it all, Avatar 2, The Way of Water, Atlanta, Atlantis. Adjacent to Atlanta, there's this property, I think it's 30-some acres, probably 33, I don't know. But there's this property where the citizens of the forest live. And they are protesting against the police who want to tear down their forest and build a police training camp. And what I pointed out on the blog, if you go to timawesome.blog, is that what they've created is this segment is right adjacent to the BLM marchers. It's this environmentalist themed BLM marchers that are defending that particular property, but it's more about indigenous rights and environmentalism. They're fusing environmentalism with BLM as a part of their wider critique of the West. But that little area that these tree dwellers are protecting is Pandora. It's like literally Pandora right there. And the police encroaching are just like in the movie Avatar 2, where the Pandora people have to fight them off. And they have the first martyr, the first environmentalist martyr, was the one that this whole event was built around. And in the pictures that they show of him, and it's all symbolic, he's reading to his child, and he has "Good night, moon," and "Where the wild things are." Well, if you put those two together, a good night moon, well, Pandora is a moon. It's a jungle moon. Where the wild things are, it's a jungle moon. And the main character puts on a wolf costume and he becomes king of the beasts. That's the story of Avatar. Like, it's pretty layered when you delve into the programming, concurrent programming, predictive programming. Some of the UFO people are suggesting that the footage we've seen of these balloons getting popped are doctored and that they're actually triangular UFO craft. And that if you take these pictures and you put them through the right filters, you're going to be able to see for yourself that we're looking at triangles.
G'day everyone, Damien here from CTech Research and the UFO community. Look, I'll let you have a look through these photos. They are re-emerging again, but I'm going to give you some clarity at the end because not everything is as it seems. Alright, enjoy.
Shape finder, and what you're seeing is the balloon is actually a pyramid. Again, this is just clickbait. I'm not going to go too deep into it. There are entire channels of believers, and again, I'm not a believer, but there are channels on YouTube of true believers who will watch the ISS footage eating popcorn like it's real. It's like, man, this is a CGI movie. You're not watching a live feed. And whenever they detect an anomaly, like a bubble comes up from one of the scuba divers, because the thing's underwater, they go on YouTube and they say, oh, we saw a UFO. And I noticed a lot of the UFO sightings recently have been spherical. Maybe this ties into it. Because what you're seeing aren't UFOs, you're seeing bubbles, but they just don't know. They assume they're seeing... Look, I've seen some things. I've seen squids around the ISS. And a couple of years ago, they even sent some baby squids to the space station. But I saw a literal squid. Somebody on YouTube posted a video. They said it was a dragon in space. It's like, look, even if dragons existed, and even if they went to space, they wouldn't be flapping their wings in space. And when I looked closer at this supposed dragon outside the ISS, it was obviously a squid, or an octopus rather. And the way the octopus moves through the water, it has a flapping-like motion, but that's what it was. Let me catch up on comments here. Again, this is the pre-UFO invasion, pre-Superbowl 57 Metascript breakdown. Okay. Commenter says, staged gang-on-gang subversion groups, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, all self-contained. Are you talking about the Proud Boys versus the Soy Boys competing for the affections of daddy government? Yeah, I agree. I think it's the same with the vax and the anti-vax. I think that is also one of these Hegelian dialectics. We're looking at whatever you want to call them. It's sleight of mind. It's really tricky. The world stage is all based on trickery. It's based on stage magic. Okay, let's continue. Lean Dion says, Unholy getting rinsed on OS Radio. I didn't think the song was all that interesting. And I didn't think it was all that satanic. And, you know, even the Church of Satan, I saw him on Twitter, commented that it was about infidelity. You know, aside from the costumes, you wouldn't have arrived at that. I guess the name Unholy, but why? Anyway, moving in. Ashy Dog says, just tuned in. Well, we're just going through a lot of the predictive programming and a lot of the things that suggest that something bad is going to happen for the Super Bowl today, like this one. Here for the Corn says, you're going to have to deal with the Chiefs. Now, he's referring to the Kansas City Chiefs and, of course, the Eagles, but And again, with their new black uniforms, with the EMP symbolism, very interesting. But look here. He says, quote, "You're going to have to deal with the Chiefs, the great ones. The last one announced our arrival from the pit 9/11. This one is about to show the world that they're not going anywhere." What is he talking about? Some kind of cryptic meaning here. If you look at the arrowhead, and again, there's another reference to the arrow. I was talking about Hunger Games and the broken arrow and the mockingjay. Well, here you have your arrow reference, an arrowhead, KC. And if you want to go into the numerology, K is 11 and 3, 33. 33 minutes of darkness at an event presided over by Beyonce, who of course is heavily metascripted, just as Jay-Z, who was wearing a shirt that said, "This is all black magic." Now, of course, there's multiple layers of meanings, and as I was saying, black doesn't just necessarily refer to race in any of these contexts. It refers to whatever is happening next. And black magic, yeah, it is magic. And what you're seeing here, though, look, it's a very dark background, and the football coming in looks like a blimp. It looks like some kind of a projectile, a missile, like the head of a missile, not a football, because it's metal looking. And then you have the eagle and the arrow going towards it. This guy on Twitter is suggesting there might be some deeper meaning to it here. I think the broken arrow is the main thing I'm looking at. Again, we're waiting for our 33rd broken arrow, which could correspond to the KC. All right, continue. Oh, by the way, nukes are fake, but that doesn't mean they can't be simulated. And if there's enough crisis actors, they can make people believe in anything, like a bowl of bat soup making everybody sick. Super Bowl 57 action with Kevin Hart. Just another obvious Hart reference. Some pop quiz. Pop quiz. If you're in chat, Andrew Tate's assets were seized. Remember, Andrew Tate was the one who was called out by Greta for having 33 sports cars. But pop quiz. His assets were seized after this police raid. They seized land, watches, cash, cryptocurrency, and cars. Anyone here care to guess how much money did they take? How many pounds worth of assets did they take? In the millions. I'll let some people make their write their answers down. Symbia says 33. Rocco 33 million. Yep, 33 million. You got it. 33. Harmon Walker says, "My prediction for halftime, they'll promote the Vax big time." Lean Dion says, "Jay to wear that shirt at the LeBron ritual is fitting." Joined by X322. Ashy Dog. All right. We're up to about 60 people here. And I just have to say, I've said enough things to get us banned. This video will be available on Rofkin. Rofkin Infinite Plane Radio. We have more than 2,100 subs now. It will be available there and on BitChute Infinite Plane Society. It actually automatically exports as soon as I terminate. Spirit says, in Mexican TV, they're calling the Super Bowl as Ritual Out of This World. Oh, interesting. Ritual Out of This World. All right, let's continue. This is a scene from the end of Alice in Borderland episode 8. Now what you see are a bunch of blimps over the city. A bunch of blimps. And this is the same show that I was showing earlier, has the space lasers coming from the sky. Chinese, not Jewish, space lasers. And it looks just like a scene out of Alice in Borderland. Now take a look at this. This is something I had to point out because we were talking about the ISS earlier today, and I want to talk about this. I was like, let me mark this for later. It's kind of connected here because in one of these videos that goes into the predictive programming, the uploader focuses on Tom Clancy's The Sum of All Fears. And the reason why that stands out to me is Sum of All Fears, I think, is where a lot of the predictive programming comes in for 9/11. And this is a Tom Clancy who also gave us The Division and Dark Winter. These things are all connected. And I'm going to play a clip here from this video. This is Super Bowl 2023, examining the predictive programming and creepy commercials. So beyond the cannibalism, we have the nuke stuff. And after I play this, Let me play this first. I'm going to show you how it connects to the space station and 9/11.
Today, especially involving Ukraine, the US, and Russia. Given that this movie's title is the sum of all fears, it is interesting to think about what this means. If this event is the culmination of fears that have permeated the world over the past 3 years, then it is bound to be notable. I have also come across more information regarding the illness in a series that I referenced before. In the series Blood and Treasure, we are told how fear is used to cause mass panic and chaos, and that an apparent illness that is not real is used to stir up that chaos. Let's listen to a few clips from the series and see if this sounds familiar.
Okay, this is what I was looking for earlier. I'm so glad I finally found it. Now, this video, Super Bowl 2023, examining the predictive programming, it's linked in my minds.com account, and I can't recommend this enough. It might be too late if it has any predictive value, but you got to hear this. This is one of the best breakdowns, one of the best revelations of the method of the pandemic that you'll ever hear.
She intentionally gave her own soldiers something that wouldn't protect him. Or...
There is no virus. It was just some localized bacteria.
the virus never worked. But the world doesn't know that.
Why make up the virus?
Maybe she just wants chaos.
Only if she was controlling the chaos for some purpose.
Okay, so the question is, how does the chaos benefit her?
I don't know. Can't see it. It's hard to focus when the whole bloody world is coming apart.
Now, she says it's hard to focus when the whole world's coming apart, and then he realizes it. The whole reason for the fakery was for the chaos itself.
What if that's the point? Look, these videos that are flooding social media right now. This is Rome. They're saying that was last night, but this happened 3 years ago. Chuck and I were at that game. I remember because we got stuck on the subway for 2 hours. Violet's posting these clips to make it look like society's falling apart.
So what he's displaying here is out of context videos to make it look like there's chaos. Just like Les Luthor's been pointing out on Twitter, how they did Ukraine. Playing a bunch of videos out of context to create the perception, to create fear, to control people.
These clips to make it look like society's falling apart.
So it's all coordinated.
The virus isn't real, but the panic is.
It's a setup.
One has to ask oneself.
Yeah, fascinating, right? Okay, continuing here. Lean Dion says, Jay-Z, Jehovah, did a Last Supper performance at the Grannies where he described himself as God. I saw that, and I think that's relevant, very relevant, because here I've been mind mapping all of the examples of the Black Christ archetype that's been introduced in recent years. Kendrick Lamar at the Grammys won an award for the song where it has Nipsey Hussle, who has been portrayed as a Christ, turning into Kanye West, who's been portrayed as a Christ, you know, the shape-shifting video. But on the cover of that album by Kendrick Lamar, he's got the crown of thorns. Then he performs with the crown of thorns in this bloody garb, and he got an award for Heart, Part 5. Again, Heart connects to Damar Hamlin and this whole Heart Project thing. Cubstar says, out of context was the theme of 2022. Yep. Rocco says, I love how fast people can find predictive programming about current events. Yeah, that's why we coined the term here, concurrent programming. You can look back at 9/11 and talk about it all the time, but you can go to Netflix right now and see what's going to happen tomorrow. We've made this case time and time again. Still going up to my notes. Okay, this is what I wanted to get to. I brought up the sum of all fears. Well, the astronaut who watched 9/11 unfold from space, this was Frank Culbertson, the only American astronaut on the ISS. He's up above looking down, and he's listening to the audiobook Sum of All Fears, which he said is a, quote, fabulous book. And Sum of All Fears contains a storyline like 9/11. What are the odds? And he's the one who brought this up. He's the one who said, wow, I was just listening to an audiobook and I saw it on Earth, as though you could see the Twin Towers getting hit by a plane from 200 miles above. And back then their special effects were like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood prop level special effects. Very corny. But the interesting thing to me here is, of all the Metascriptors connected to 9/11, you've got Stanley Kubrick, obvious. Then you got James Cameron, And James Cameron's Titanic came out a few years before. As the Titanic breaks in two, looks like the Twin Towers has jumpers. It sinks one part then the other, just like 9/11. On 9/11, James Cameron was at the wreckage of the actual Titanic. Now, there's a symbolic link between the falling of the towers and the sinking of the Titanic. It's about too big to fail. It's about the Tower of Babel, which has been correlated to the space station. And then here's where the numbers come in that I find interesting. You have 911 in Revelations, which refers to Apollyon, the destroyer in the abyss. James Cameron, who brought us Terminator 2, which has also 9/11 predictive programming, he's at the wreckage of the Titanic, and he is filming a documentary called Ghosts of the Abyss. I mean, the Abyss is a Revelations reference. And of course, the reverse of 9/11, and we're talking about him at the bottom of the ocean, but up above you have Culbertson at the same time. And 119 has been consistently correlated with stuff falling from the sky. The date 119 was the date that the first patient came down with COVID. It was the date that Donnie Darko, a movie replete with 9/11 predictive programming, was released. And 119 is a reference to Genesis 11:9 and the falling of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, the Titanic, the Twin Towers, the One World Tower, these things are all correlated symbolically. But again, here you have three directors crossing paths. Tom Clancy, James Cameron, and Stanley Kubrick, all in this great work here. But what are the odds that he'd be listening to a Tom Clancy book? Which I guess, in the future, I can imagine, we'd be watching Hunger Games while it actually plays out in the real world. What were people doing during 2020? They were watching movies about viruses. They were watching movies about lockdowns. There was a movie called Songbird that came out even before we had that movie. What was it called? Bird Box, where they have to wear masks on their eyes. And if you see somebody not wearing a mask and you're not wearing a mask, you catch what they have and you have to get to quarantine. That was some predictive programming, all fear-based, trauma-induced mind control. And there's another show I watched on Netflix, you have to see it, it's called Hot Skull, about verbally communicated mind viruses. They have to lock down the internet, quarantine society, and everybody's mandated to wear ear coverings so nobody can say misinformation to you, which they call jabbering, which sounds like gibberish, but it may actually have a connection to the needle and the need to stop misinformation about the jab. Okay, let me play a clip here. This is UFO shot down over Alaska.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for your patience while we were delayed a little bit. I have a few things to talk about up top, and then we'll get right to your questions. So first of all, to add to information already provided earlier by the White House, at the direction of the President of the United States, fighter aircraft assigned to U.S. Northern Command successfully took down a high-altitude airborne object off the northern coast of Alaska at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today within U.S. sovereign airspace over U.S. territorial water. On February 9, North American Aerospace Defense Command detected an object on ground radar and further investigated and identified the object using fighter aircraft. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. U.S. Northern Command is beginning recovery operations now. U.S. Northern Command's Alaska Command coordinated...
Now the uploader says, here comes the alien invasion narrative. We must be close to rapture. They're going to show up at the Superbowl and they're going to demand that we go carbon neutral. They're going to demand that we give over national sovereignty to, I don't know, Klaus Schwab. There's an agenda here at play, obviously. But we know from experience that it doesn't matter that we see through it. We're in the minority. We're not the believers, and the believers dictate this reality. Everything's totally inverted. Okay, this is an interesting Twitter account called Michael in Truth. I highly recommend this one. And he's done great work in finding a lot of the predictive programming for the upcoming PSYOP. And the football game's a PSYOP by itself, just knowing how scripted and fake it is. And if you don't know, watch the last video about LeBron James, the number 38. It's all scripted. They're all actors. NBA, nothing but actors. Neil Heslin on the Sandy Hook shooting has a very curious resemblance to Thomas Richard Kelly, who died on 9/11. There have been a number of people who have actually gone through the supposed 9/11 registry to find that, well, many of these pictures are recycled. It's like this person does not exist, given away in the metadata. Unidentified object detected over Lake Huron between Michigan and Ontario. Notice how they're allowing people to run with the UFO. They keep saying, it's like it's a unidentified object. Like, why are they obfuscating it? Why are they allowing people to run to the conclusion that we're looking at some kind of alien craft? This is CBK News. They're showing a craft that's been recovered, and it does look kind of like a flying saucer, but it's beneath a tarp. It says here, CBK News, cover-up operation has started. All right, continuing. And real versus fake is something we talk about a lot here. And there's this squid climbing up this column here, and it was supposedly brought in by a storm from California. And if you look at the comments, most people are amazed by this squid that is enamored by this concrete column, and it looks real. I can't tell you why it's fake. That's one of the tricky things here. Like, it's not enough to say something's fake. You have to know why it's fake. You have to explain why it's fake, or why the burden of proof has not been met, why there's reasonable doubt. In this case, why is it fake? What makes it fake? This isn't some stationary camera with a CGI or AVR overlay like they do on the ISS. This is a moving camera. And that's something you don't see with the astronauts. The only time you see a moving camera in the ISS if it's a contrived guided tour situation. They never pass a camera around. You know what you would never see on the space station? And I would pay $1 million for this if I had it. You would never see an astronaut with an iPhone recording it, hit record, and throw the phone so it floats across the room to another astronaut. They can't do that. They can't have moving cameras. They're not that good yet with the tech. They will be in the future, though, once they phase out the space station, which is my primary reason for suspecting that they got to pull the space station down. The special effects are outdated, outmoded. Anyway, I'm looking at this giant squid, and I have no reason to say it's fake. I'm just assuming it's fake. I mean, it's fakeable. I wouldn't go with it being real. I would need something more tangible. It's not evidence in and of itself. And just going through the comments, people are asking, is this real? Here's another one. It's a sharktopus in distress from global warming and white supremacy. That one's obviously fake. It's getting increasingly difficult to tell, though, between an actual deep fake, an actual thing and a deep fake. And it's going to get better. The effects are going to get better. You know who brought this up was, I think it was Douglas Trumbull, the special effects guy from 2001 Space Odyssey. He brought this up. He said, you'll notice that the CGI doesn't age well. Every couple of years, it just doesn't look as bad as what came before. And it just doesn't last. Whereas the special effects using props from 50 years ago stand up pretty well today. My take has been, this is intentional. I think in the last 20 or 30 years, they have deliberately dumbed down our visual literacy. I think that's the new dark age. We're visually illiterate. Can't tell the difference between real and fake. A commenter says, squids have goo wherever and there's nothing on the ground, it's fake. Right. It's just minor details, but you can see how it's advancing. It won't be much longer before they're able to make it totally convincing. And that is considered to be an eyewitness account because people believe it's on the screen, it's real. And this is how you fake an alien invasion. This is how you fake a lot of things. You just provide a lot of fake eyewitness accounts, whether it's somebody reciting how they know what caused the planes to cause the buildings to fall, or UFOs. Elon Musk says, don't worry, some of my alien friends stopping by. I think that the belief in aliens is such an important part of their big structure that they've had to ban people who discount the existence of UFOs. They've made it a scientific thing. Like, oh, if you don't believe in aliens, you're just not a believer, and you don't understand the science. Neil deGrasse Tyson had said something to the effect of, not believing in aliens is like putting a bucket of water in the ocean, withdrawing it and saying, there's no whales. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with that logic. Obviously, aliens are real. Like, suddenly it's become, scientific. And then here you have the flat earthers come along and they say, well, that's all fake and it's a psyop. Well, they're not going to fall for it. DoD confirms the presence of unidentified flying object. Like, they're playing this card right now. We'll see how far they can take it. Damar Hamlin says he'll, quote, change the world. Yep, well, he made, $3.3 million by 3:30 that morning after that psyop. It went pretty well. But change the world is a very interesting phrase. It ties into BLM, George Floyd. It's what his daughter said. It ties into Colin Kaepernick's change the world, Ben & Jerry's ice cream. There's a context for that specific meme. I'm going to play a short clip here. This is Brad at Love and Saucers. I'm at a consciousness and conspirituality expo, and the anti-vax white guy reggae song is Bringing Down the House. Yeah, I see these ladies taking their sweaters off.
My health is my true wealth and no vaccine will compromise it. Needles injecting into the sheep, but they're genetically modified. Installing the operating system, 5G comes online. If death by toxic chemicals or heavy metals ever make the headlines, they blame it on the virus, which they never purified. That's right. Because we're living through a state.
Yep. Dangerous misinformation. That's a verbally communicated mind virus. That's jabbering. All those people should be wearing ear coverings. Canada shoots down its own UFO after US in the same week, TMZ.com. TikTok runs rampant with theories after UFO shot down in Alaska. Okay, here's the actual Illuminati playing card that they're using right now. All of the members have been instructed to take this card out of their packs. Flying saucer, unique gadget artifact. This vehicle was found buried in a cornfield in Idaho. As property of the Illuminati, the flying saucer lets you make one extra automatic takeover each turn. If you make this extra takeover, you must discard your top undrawn plot card. Okay. If they play this, they're going to cancel whatever they were planning. So whatever the Illuminati was going to do, it might actually be... Oh, look, this has got to be one of the more ridiculous costumes I've seen yet. This is Sam Smith in this inflatable suit, and this is a Photoshop rendering by Cubstar of Sam Smith at the pool. But I'm thinking, is this another tie-in to the balloons? Is this predictive programming? This celebrity wearing an inflatable costume? I'm kind of thinking it might be. 737 says good song. Oh yeah, the reggae. Yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, the lyrics, it's super easy to understand as well. I mean, that's dangerous. The last thing the powers that be want is a catchy song, like something from Chief Crow or something just going viral, or COVID Cooties by Symbiote. If something like that gets out there, it transmits a lot of ideas along with it. It's an auditory Trojan horse. A lot of breaking news again. I'm just scrolling through my Twitter feed. Again, Twitter UFO is blowing up, and this is going to be good. This is a good business for the paranormal crowd. Breaking, scientists say a piece of the sun's surface has broken off, a quote, first ever event. Yep, sun falling from the sky on Sunday. But a clarification, a piece of the actual surface of the sun didn't break off. Like, it's not like an egg, like a shell. A solar prominence, a long electrical charge of plasma broke from the sun's surface. Okay, there's a lot going on in the world of blue pill politics I want to get into later. A lot of good drama with some of these characters like Steven Crowder, Eliza Schaefer. Stuff like, Project Veritas. Project Veritas, a bunch of LARPers, they're falling apart because apparently their war chest was wasted on paying for a musical about James O'Keefe's life with backup dancers and singers and everything. And they all revolted against him because he blew so much money on that stunt that apparently nobody cared about. Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to stop, quote, acting like a maniac, but couldn't, right? Again, we'll go back into the blue pill politics later. I want to focus mostly on the Super Bowl and what's happening with that. Let me go ahead and turn this back over. In fact, you know what? I'm not going to turn this over to 24/7. I'm going to have to delete this video anyway, but we are going to be back live later after to do an after action review of whatever it is, whether it's a massive nothing burger or who knows. I mean, I'm not really in the business here of making predictions necessarily, but the predictive programmings are something of a model. And we barely scrape the surface when it comes to all of the strange timing or the coincidental timings of things. There's a whole genre. It's beyond gematria where they just go into the names and the numbers. Now they're counting days between releases of movies and specific events and finding some pretty incredible and undeniable correlations that show that, you know, as I've been saying, the entire PSYOP entertainment complex, the whole thing, it's all wired to a centralized script. That's why I use the phrase Metascript, and I point out these directors that I suspect of being Metascript writers. All right, thanks for joining. We'll be back later. This is Chief Crow and the Flat Earth Worms Auto Hoax or GTFO, and I'll be putting a link to this video below. By the way, if you're still here, the 24/7 audio stream is still on. It's just the video on YouTube's going off, just for clarification. You can still go to infiniteplane.live and catch the audio. It will be on replay. All right, today is February the 8th, 2022, and this is a live premiere on the main YouTube channel, which means I'm going to keep this safe for the most part, and I'll attempt to keep it brief. A couple of things I wanted to go over. First, right off the bat, if you notice today, again, it's February the 8th. If you look at the Google Doodle, it appears to be a woman with a crown rising out of the ocean, and if you look really closely at it, it appears to depict a wave coming in. The pink, I guess that's a flower on the right, looks kind of nuky. It looks like a mushroom cloud, or it actually looks kind of like a COVID ball, but very mushroom cloud, maybe even Space Needle-like. Definitely some kind of flood, and yeah, I would say it looks like possibly a tsunami. The ocean level is definitely up in the middle, and she's rising out of it. Now, I haven't looked at the official explanation as to who this is, but I'm just pointing out this correlates with the feminine quality of the Kraken as it's been defined in the various ways. It's synonymous with Gaia, Mother Earth, and it represents this rejection of the West and its pollution. And if you look, she even has a crown, like a corona, and she stands before the sun. All of this is very interesting. In the context of this new statue that was just erected in Manhattan above the courthouse, which has the Kraken-esque creature with the crown. We're closing in on Super Bowl Sunday, which is very much represented in predictive programming. It's February the 12th. This is going to be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. It's the 43rd day of the year, leaving 322. There are some connections that have been forged here between this Super Bowl and a lot of the predictive programming in Dark Knight Rises about the stadium exploding, leaving box 322 untouched. Obviously a Skull and Bones reference. We talked about Skull and Bones extensively last July when the Georgia Guidestones were exploded on George W. Bush's birthday, major Skull and Bonesman from Yale, and this was on 7/6, his 76th birthday. It's the 42nd year of the Guidestone's existence when it was blown up, the capstone. And as it was pointed out by a caller, when looking from above, the Georgia Guidestones give you a skull and bones, and it was the capstone, which therefore represents the skull, which was damaged. I took out of it some kind of headshot symbolism, and interestingly enough, a couple days later, Donald Trump's friend, former PM of Japan, Abe, or Abe, but again Abe, was shot, assassinated. And I say Abe because, of course, one, he's associated with Trump, and we've seen predictive programming for a headshot, a Lincoln-esque assassination. And then two, of course, this Super Bowl specifically is on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And what's more, when you go back a little bit in time here, on July 4th, we had a pretty big psyop on 7/4 where the shooter had a 4-7 tattooed on his face, a 4-7 on his car. The whole event was replete with 4-7. It was the Highland Park shooter. Now Highland Park, Parkland High, a lot of overlaps. Quite a lot to unpack there. But he was obsessed with Lee Harvey Oswald. He had Lee Harvey Oswald on his wall. That's very significant because he looks like, if you look, he looks like the character Waldo from Where's Waldo? And I had a live stream at the time titled Where's Oswaldo? Simply because he was showing up at Trump rallies dressed like Waldo. Where's Waldo? He's at a Trump rally. Oswaldo. And of course, on his wall, as you can see behind him here, Lee Harvey Oswald about to be shot by Jack Ruby. Meanwhile, his mother's shopping at Target. Kind of an inside joke here. But the number 47 is connected with this in a few different ways, namely the date, July 4th, and then the shooter was obsessed with 47. Kubrick's signature is apparent in the Trump head wound ritual. There's a lot of predictive programming, and the number 45 on the side of Trump's head seems to be tied in with this. And one of the things I was pointed out with this particular visual mind map is that Stanley Kubrick's character, Joker, in Full Metal Jacket represents JFK. That's why he has the target. Again, target, JFK, Oswaldo, the shooter here. He has the target where JFK was shot. Not a coincidence. A couple of other things about the number. Again, the shooter in Highland Park, think Parkland High, like David Cruz, it's connected. President Kennedy was taken to Parkland Hospital after his head wound. He died 17 minutes after arrival. A shooter in Highland Park had a 47 on his temple. 4 plus 5 is 9, and 4 plus 7 is 11, so 9/11. If you look at the numbers with Trump's presidency, 45 and 47, someone had brought a 9/11 out of it. Not coincidental here, as Kubrick, in all likelihood, well, by all evidence, directed 9/11. Now this all ties in, this was last summer, with these tsunami simulations in Seattle that they were having, where they were talking about a 7.5 magnitude earthquake that would cause a tsunami in Seattle that would flood with 42-foot tidal waves. You have the number 42 already connected with Washington State, 42 Space Needle, 42 meters wide, 42 seconds at the top. Everything about Washington is 42. In this simulation, they were pretending, what would happen if we had a 7.5 magnitude earthquake and basically Seattle would be under a 42-foot flood. At this time, on Stranger Things, there was an earthquake in the final episode that was 7.4. And this correlated with an assassination and the releasing of, or the opening of the, quote, Watergate. Now, Watergate ties into Trump, ties into Nixon. Very interesting connection here. But the main thing is Watergate certainly connects with this Kraken that we've been discussing. Interestingly enough, when this character dies and it opens the gate, it's over portal at coordinates 116, mentioned in the show. And the new Supreme Court Justice, Justice Jackson, was the 116th Supreme Court Justice, the 116th Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And she was very much associated with the Crown Act. This is highly significant. It has to do with hair specifically, but what's more, it has to do with this statue which we recently saw. First woman statue to be erected on this courthouse that only has male statues. And if you look at the statue, it has a pretty obvious gold crown-like look on it. And I would say it corresponds to this woman, also a black woman like the new Supreme Court Justice coming out of the sea. Kraken connection. And of course she has the gold crown. And if you don't know about the statue, I like it. But it's a statue in Manhattan. I think it's 9 feet tall. And it's 9 feet tall. And it's the first female to be on top of this, again, predominantly male-dominated structure. And this is tied in with this Kraken thing. And again, the first female, the rising above the Crown Act. Again, the Crown Act. And not to go too far back into the past, but the Crown Act was actually kind of tied into that story of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. And that has to do with the joke. Chris Rock made a joke about Jada Smith's hair, if you recall, or lack thereof. He made a joke that she could be the next G.I. Jane, which isn't even really a good joke, nor is it that bad of an insult. But whatever it is, it was made a big deal. And this was concurrent with this Crown Act, which is about non-discrimination against black hair in particular. Again, correlating the crown with the hair. And Jada actually said, quote, "Our hair is our crown." Now she said that with relation to the movie Nutty Professor, where, if you didn't know, in Nutty Professor, Jada Smith plays a character who is at a comedy show, and a Chris Rock-like comedian insults her, and her boyfriend attacks him, just like what happened in real life. But this was all tying in to the first female black justice Supreme Court, and interestingly enough, it tied in that movie King Richard about Serena and Venus Williams going through the Green Court, Supreme Court. One of them becoming queen of the Green Court, which ties into Venus, the name Venus, the color green, Jada, jade, green, and the husband of Venus, the Smith, a blacksmith like Will Smith, who gets kicked out of Olympus, like Will Smith getting kicked out of the Oscars. I mean, this is all ritual stuff we went into last year. It's all theater. It's pretty dense. It's layered in its meanings. But if you look here, this is the statue in Manhattan and the gold crown and the tentacle-like arms, which I would contend is very Kraken-like. The statue is called Witness. And I don't believe it's going to be permanent. But my point being, it ties in, it correlates with this Google image of the day. Again, emphasis on the corona and the crown. Okay, continuing. I'm just glossing over a lot of things. There's just too much to go into right now all at once. I will when we're live. I'm keeping an eye on this Colin Kaepernick documentary. I've been watching it, where he's going through more than 1,000 cop-related killings, and they're double-checking the autopsies, and they're uncovering things. And it says here, to date, less than a year after its launch, the initiative has provided 42 autopsies tied to police or in-custody death cases. In other words, they're second-guessing the results, and they're finding the ones that match, and they're going to produce for the public a record of abuses that were covered up. Continuing, Taylor Swift won a Grammy for Best Music Video, All Too Well, the short film, and she happens to be 33. This correlates to the Beyonce getting her 32nd and 33rd Grammys. Again, Beyonce has officially become the winningest artist in Grammy history with 33 Grammys. So she has 33. She's significant in the world stage right now for a few reasons. One of them, of course, being she performed at the Blackout Bowl, which was Super Bowl 47. Super Bowl 47 was the one that went blackout for 33 minutes. 33 Grammys, 33 minutes. In 2020, she released that show, that movie called Black is King, based on Lion King, which is based on Macbeth. And it has a man falling from the sky on the cover. This is all very interesting. I don't want to go too deep into the weeds yet with that one. I do want to jump into this one right away. LeBron James has proven that the NBA is completely rigged. It's more than rigged. LeBron James beating Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record was a scripted hoax. NBA fraud proven by LeBron James beating Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's scoring record. Take a look at the score, his age, the coincidental timing, and Kareem stepping out with a 33 on his shirt, and you'll likely agree that some aspects of the NBA are rigged. Now, some people will throw it out. They'll just reject it and say, you can't say it's all rigged, and I'm not saying it's all rigged. I'm specifically talking about certain elements. Maybe it's on a need-to-know basis and not everyone's involved, but the scripting is a key element here, just as it is with the, quote, news. Consider the following coincidences, and you'll see it's not a bold claim to suggest the NBA is rigged. And if you find it inconceivable after, then Big Brother controls your mind and you probably can't think for yourself. LeBron James, 38, four-time NBA champion, beat Abdul-Jabbar's old record of 38,387 when he scored his 38,388th point. He's 38 years old. It was the 38th day of the year. He scored 38 points in that game. The record was set 38 years and 308 days ago. Again, these are just all correlating. This is all coincidence? I don't think so. LeBron James happened to be born 38 weeks after that record was set. Sports are scripted in the same way the news is. Sure, the athleticism is real. They're actually playing the game. But just as there's real news reporting, and not everyone in the media takes part in psychological operations, there's a point here where real and fake merge. There's a dividing line. You have the believers and the perpetrators on different sides of this. We call out the apparent insiders all the time, and I think too many people idolize these athletes and celebrities and think that they're on their side somehow. Well, they're on the other side. They're more on the side of the in the know than believers in really prescribed BS. You know, it's believers versus believers being controlled by the knowers pulling the strings on top. Conspiracy theorists and genuine seekers of truth attempt to cross that line, but are generally pushed back by shame, personal attacks, censorship, and the fear of going too far. The enormity of the claim is what beguiles most into not contemplating the deeper implications of this kind of in-your-face, ritualistic mockery. Again, if you can't see it, it's because Big Brother told you not to, and that's fine. A lot of people have pointed this out again. LeBron James scored his 38,388th point, 38-year record, 38th day of the year, he's 38, and so on. And this is not the first. We have many examples like this. Okay, we will be live later, definitely, to talk about this and lots more. We've got the various award ceremonies, all this idolatry. I want to point out, too, that one of the award winners, of course, was Kendrick Lamar with the Heart, I think Heart Part 5, Again, the heart emphasis, very significant. The hairstyle on Madonna, who's being ripped on for wearing a mask. A lot of people think she's wearing a mask, and she's fighting back, saying it was a bad camera angle, that people are shallow. But look what she's a part of. She's part of that industry, and it's just at the point where it's now it eats its own. But if you look here, her hair is very similar to what you see up above, and that's not a coincidence, if you ask me. It's about this. It's the Gaia consciousness, or the recent Avatar films. This idea of a Mother Earth rising up to fight back against the toxic masculinity of capitalism. And this is very consistent. It's pushing back against a male-dominated society. What she represents and what that statue represents are the same. In fact, on that Sam Smith song, the one, I think it was Unholy, which was performed with a bunch of like Party City kind of Halloween costumes, looking like devils, and it shocked everybody. I didn't find it all that shocking necessarily. I mean, it's just the lyrics weren't overtly satanic, but the presentation of it, of course, you would wonder why. Why even do this? Who are they reaching? Is it specifically to shock people? Even CBS though came out in advance of it and said that they were ready to worship. But I'm looking at this in the bigger context, and one of the key takeaways from this, and by the way, look at the word unholy and how they crossed the vertical line on the H, making the symbol of Saturn. And she was in a black cage. I mean, obviously it is what it is. I'm not doubting that this is a very strong emphasis on what people would term the satanic. But what they're putting out in front here, I think, is again pushing back against the binary and the male-dominated patriarchy thing, and they're trying to make everything one world, everyone plugged into Gaia, and it's working apparently. And I think that that's what this represents. This Sam Smith character's performance has been talked about endlessly because it's pretty much confirming what every conspiracy theorist has said all this time. And so I don't even feel any kind of reservation these days when I say that the world is run by witches and warlocks. Like, what more evidence do you need? Then another thing that was pointed out is that the singer is the first openly trans to receive this award. So gender neutrality was a big part of this thing. And then you have this gender neutral God to be considered by the Church of England. And what I find to be interesting about all of this is this Gaia concept, because Gaia is a goddess, but the god of this world has always been represented by the obelisk. It's always been a god, and the sky has been the goddess. That's even true with Thelema, the main cult, the one that Musk is a part of. SpaceX is SpaceX. It's literally a fertility cult, but it's the earth god, Osiris. And it seems like even that's been sort of changed. Like, they're changing the entire paradigm. I'm saying it's the same old system with a new paint job. Now, again, we're looking at an upcoming holiday being Lincoln's birthday and the Super Bowl. There's a lot there to unpack. I have a prediction of my own, which I don't really want to put it out there right now. What I'd like to do instead is just say that this Super Bowl is looked at by a lot of conspiracy theorists right now because, of course, predictive programming. I shouldn't say conspiracy theorists. I should just say impartial observers. The coincidence theorists don't see it. We'll talk about the big earthquake. I noticed it happens the same night. I'm looking at Drudge and the report says Armageddon. And then here you have Elon Musk tweeting end of days vibes about this Sam Smith performance. And he's wearing a red suit of armor called the Devil's Avenger costume from a store called Abracadabra, which is the word of the Thelemic New Age. And it has a ram on it, symbol of Mars or Aries. And of course, he's taken us to Mars. But he put this on Halloween. Everything about this costume. And by the way, in the photo of Elon Musk where he's wearing this Devil's Avenger costume, he's got a phone that has the timestamp set on 10:32. Damar Hamlin had the same timestamp on his phone and a detonation symbol or a nuclear radiation symbol. Probably not a coincidence. Okay, I've been watching this new show called From, and in it there's a mention of the number 73 and how we are living in the 74th book of the Bible. Just a little bit of trivia here. There's 73 books in the Catholic Bible. 46 Old Testament, 27 New. But 73, again, you can look at that as an anagram for El, the name of God, not a coincidence. There's an article out by Salman Rushdie. He's been interviewed after the attempt on his life. 33 years after a fatwa was declared, a $3.3 million bounty. He gets stabbed in front of a group of people, and now he reemerges with this one-eye symbolism. I don't believe it. I believe he's an actor. Yep, aftershocks like Armageddon, and then you have Sam Smith brings Satan, whips, and cages to the Grammys. Again, this is the Grammys where Taylor Swift, 33, wins something and Beyonce gets her 33rd. It's all heavily occulted. Now, I haven't quite determined what the number 38 means in the context of LeBron James. Could mean a lot of things. Could mean 3/8. I don't really get too deep into the gematria of it, other than to point out that, yeah, there's a pattern here, and it reveals that there's a great deal of hoaxery. We've talked about the balloon thing, which it's obviously a scripted event. It happened to fall and get shot down on the same day, which is 2/4, that the Moonfall movie was released about stuff falling from the sky. Again, 2/4 is Kobe Bryant's number, and we just a couple weeks ago had that anniversary pass. A major psyop we'll look into again, but the number 24 and 42 are often correlated with things falling. All right, we'll be live to discuss all of this and more. I just wanted to record something safe for this channel. I'm going to be working on doing more of this daily in addition to the usual live streams. And I will be covering specific topics, going over specific mind maps, different things that we're working on concurrently. But again, Super Bowl 47 was the one where it went dark for 33 minutes. And I don't think it's a coincidence. And someone just posted this. This is a collection of a whole lot of very conspicuous uses of the number 47 in movies. And again, this has been correlated with Highland Park and the shooting from the summer.
For 47 years. Nice work.
47th page is always particularly significant.
And what's on page 47?
Page 47.
Page 47.
A secret code.
Last code is 4747.
477.
47. An in-joke.
This is 46.
Hidden in plain sight.
47.
47 days to make this.
Across more than 3 decades of popular culture.
47 terrible.
Tell me how to access server 47.
47.
47.
All right, anyway, we'll be back later. Thanks for joining, and subscribe to the newsletter at the link below. Okay, I'll get it started a little early. This is Chief Crow Auto Hoax, or GTFO. I put a link to the track in the chat below. Phones are open. Backup number tonight. Infinite Plane Radio. Hey, caller, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, what's up? Main topic tonight, I haven't even announced it, but mainly it's going to be the balloon. Do you have an opinion?
Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Okay, what's your take on the balloon?
When I read it the first time, okay, it's almost the same stories. When they remember the first witness they asked on 9/11, that guy that was down there, yeah, they asked him, well, yeah, it melted because of the hot stuff and everything, and he gave a whole description of what happened.
Like he was a structural engineer who knew everything about the melting point of everything, melting point of steel. Yes, he knew everything all at once. I remember that guy.
Yeah, the first story on the balloon was some guy in Montana saw it, and he said what it was, and he said how high it was, and he gave all this stuff. He's just nobody. How would he know any of this stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
First of all,
From the ground, right?
first of all, they said it was 60,000 feet plus up. You can't see it at 60,000 feet up. That's 12 miles. You can barely see a 747 at 30,000 feet. And you want to say it's 12 miles up and you can see this balloon? It wouldn't be visible.
I agree with you there, and I've seen similar accounts, and I find it very dubious. I mean, my initial thought on it was that the Harley guy, as someone in chat pointed out, the Harley guy in 9/11, yeah, there was a similar explanation for this event, and it looked to me like maybe just one of their CubeSats, SpaceX CubeSat dipped too low, and this was a cover story. But now looking at it, it seems like it's connected to a bigger agenda. What do you think the agenda is behind this thing, or do you think it's just a glitch?
No, it was too well orchestrated. It had to be something, but I just know the story is one of, okay, did you see where they said their airplane circled it and had like a trail of the airplane where it circled it? Did you see that report?
Please tell me about that report because I saw one, but I thought it was possibly a deep fake. I saw one. One.
They said it was the F-22 had went up there and circled the balloon.
Yes, that's
Okay,
the main
that was
story
the
that's
first-
going around. Uh-huh.
That was the very first one in Montana. And so I go real quick to the government site and look up F-22s. F-22's ceiling, and that's the very ceiling. It can only go as close as 52,000 feet. It can't even get up to 60,000 feet. And then on the last day when they shot it down, they tried to put a news article. Oh, we have jet fighters can go up to 65,000 feet, and they tried covering that up. But the F-22 was no more than 52,000 on the ceiling feet, and that's gliding. It's not like they can do much else. So that was
Gotcha.
another one. It was terrible. It was just a horrible story. And they got, huh?
What about the footage of it? Like the cameraman who recorded the thing blowing up? Because I thought the footage was pretty good if it was from the ground, and if it wasn't from the ground, who was recording it? I thought that was a little unusual.
I after the first day, and I knew it was such BS, I didn't even watch it anymore. I said, this is just garbage. I said, some guy could see a balloon on the ground in Montana at 60,000 feet. That's if it's straight up above you, it's 12 miles. Let's say it's out 10 miles that way, and that's where it looks like he had an angle at. What are you looking at? It's no way. If it was real, it was no way 60,000 feet. There's no way.
Agreed. And I'm looking at it as when I first saw the image of it close up, I thought, why does this thing look like a TIE fighter in between the solar panels? And behind the TIE fighter, you see the Death Star. And it looks like the Death Star. And I thought, this is kind of a callback visually to Star Wars. And Star Wars was the name for the Strategic Defense Initiative, Reagan's Star Wars, preparing us for space war. I think this might be some kind of space war tie-in.
I don't think it's anything. I think it's just a distraction. I really do. Unless there's a bigger picture down the road, like you just said. But whatever it is, it was such an easy. I always call these just the barometer for a gullibility test. That's all.
You know what? When I saw them rolling out, it's a Chinese spy camera and it's sucking up your TikTok data. I'm like, okay, who's gonna fall for this? Well, yeah, pretty much anybody on the right. It's like, yeah, it's China. And Biden's letting them record our TikTok videos or whatever they happen to be doing with TikTok, which has been kind of demonized. It's to me, it's kind of a barometer as well that people will believe anything.
That's all. Just another toilet paper theory.
Well, if nothing else, though, this is an opportunity to say something about the fact that everything that is said to be done, every function said to be done by an orbiting satellite could just as easily be done by a balloon. Like, this is no longer a secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. The people who have been talking about sataloons for a long time, I think, have been vindicated. Why would you have a CubeSat hurling around at 17,000 miles per hour going around the world when you could just have it up there peacefully, dangling?
And it does. It looks like, the people who've seen the ISS transit, right? And it does, like when you said that the other day, the first time you looked at it, you said that reminded you of the ISS. the shape of it. The one when they see it and they transit, and people got pictures of it transit in front of the sun, in front of the moon.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It actually looks very similar to the ISS. Its shape and everything. It's pretty much that bunch of cylindrical modules around a centerpiece with a window.
The only thing that gets me is the balloon wasn't transparent. All the balloons we see go up, and all the lifts, and they've been doing for all these couple of decades, they're transparent. So I don't know this. So the reason is that's just a regular weather balloon they're trying to call, and it's a solid opaque color that you can see. So that something's just all wrong. It's just all wrong. That's all.
I agree. And tonight I'm going to be going through what I've found so far, suggesting that maybe this is part of a bigger psyop. I believe that the sighting of it, or no, when they shot it down, it was, I think, the 1 year anniversary of the movie Moonfall, which is about sky infrastructure falling, the moon falling. There may be some kind of deeper meaning to this, but my first instinct was CubeSat drifted too low. They need a cover story.
So it could, the people taking the pictures that we did see, if that's the pictures, pretty much all the same pictures it seemed like, but it couldn't have been 60,000. You can't take a picture of it 12 miles away. You can't. You wouldn't see it. I mean, that's just the point right there. So when it went down, could the people on the ground actually see it? All these people saying they could see it.
I'm not at that altitude. I've seen Googleoons. I've seen these before on multiple long walks in the summer, and I don't know if it's the temperature, but for some reason, some of them dip low enough where I can see them, and they're transparent, but you see the reflection, and you can tell that it's a spherical object in the sky. And I generally can't even see the thing that's dangling below it. But there's no way these things are 60,000 feet up and visible to anyone like that. I think
on this story, there's no way it was 60,000. I agree with you.
No, I agree. It's got to be. I mean, this could just be stock footage. It could be CGI. There could be false witnesses. I don't know anybody that saw it.
That's what I'm saying. It looked pretty. It just reminds me of them going asking the people on 9/11, look at this, and they all had the story already.
Yes, exactly. Nobody knew about satelloons or altitudes or how high they fly, how these things even work. You'd say, oh, satellites are just, dangling from balloons. They would say, oh, you must be a flat earther. There's no such thing. Well, no, these are actually commonly used. And, this is what I think SpaceX actually is. And that's one of their big secrets. That's why I'm glad this happened. If nothing else, you can point out that this is probably your SpaceX, what do you call it, Starlink satellite. Your Starlink is a balloon.
The very first thing I thought when I saw it when it was coming out, I thought, oh, a balloon came down too low. It was just going to be a cover story. Could it be just that simple? And of course, we know the reason they didn't shoot it down over land or take it down over land is because we'd see what's on it. Just like when a few years ago when that thing crashed in Michigan and it had the Samsung photos and ID thing. Do you remember that?
No, what was that about?
When in Michigan, when one of their satellite balloons crashed in Michigan.
Oh yeah, that was the Samsung selfie camera.
Yeah,
that one.
It's supposed to be in space.
Oh yeah, that was a big reveal as well. People went to a party where they were told that their selfie was being projected onto a satellite with the backdrop of the Earth, and therefore you're getting a space selfie. Well, what happened is the Curverts used a GoPro lens on a camera 20 miles up and didn't tell them. And they thought that they were being photographed, quote, in space. Well, that camera satellite that you're mentioning, yeah, it fell on somebody's front lawn, and it was basically a balloon. And it said on there, Samsung space satellite. I'm like, it doesn't even get close to space.
Well, if you look at all the pictures, they almost always had the balloon cut out. You can see strings to the Samsung satellite part, right? But unless you knew what it was, you wouldn't know. I don't think there was one that showed a balloon in the crash. All the pictures were cropped that showed no balloon.
Right. Nobody knew it was a balloon until it fell in somebody's yard, and that was a purposeful misrepresentation. They let people mislead themselves. They're dishonest. They omit things. So that is a lie by omission when they cut the balloon out. And when they say it's from space and they bend the horizon line, I don't know. I mean, if you can't see through that, I guess there's no help for you anyway. But yeah, that was an accident. It just fell on somebody's front lawn. Luckily, it didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, and you've been following us enough years. I'm Harmon. I'm the one that's talked to you before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've talked about a number of things, definitely.
Right. Anyway, so I was calling in to get it out of the way right quick, so you can get back to your show. It's just that it's in all these guys listening to all these truth channels. None of them talking about it. They're acting like, "What's this? Right this?" I said you couldn't see it. Not at that height. You cannot see it. Sound like Neil deGrasse Tyson, but you cannot see it at that height.
That's such a good point. I'm glad you're bringing that up because there are so many things that just one thing that always got to me was people saying that they've seen the space station at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., at midnight, and I'm like, you can't. It's too low, and hypothetically, if it was even there, it would be in the shadow of the Earth. You couldn't possibly see it, and
So that's the only thing I can say. That could have been one of those decoys. That's all. It looked like the same picture they see. You know that. You said that your first impression was that. I remember.
right, exactly. Yeah, if the ISS that we see during transits is some kind of balloon-borne prop, that could have been it. Anyway, I appreciate the call very much, and I'll go through whatever else I have that might give us any other indication as to the meaning behind this thing.
All right, people listening in, you guys make sure you sign up to his. Oh man,
The
I'm so
Patreon,
tired.
yeah, it's Patreon.
Make sure you do his Patreon, guys. Make sure you do it.
Appreciate the
Okay,
shout
that's
out
it.
there, and definitely appreciate the call in as always. Have a great
All
evening.
right, bye.
And if you want to sign up for Patreon, it's patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society. And right now, there is a 1 month free trial, which means you get all the live notifications, you get the newsletters, you get access to the Discord server, and the first bill, which is only $1 a month. I'm working on volume, and right now I'm just trying to bring people in for the notifications alone. If you want the free ebooks, other things, yeah, there's higher tiers, but $1 gets you in, free month trial, and it gets you on the list. That way, as things progress, whatever happens, you don't miss anything. And you're not. It's not just me, obviously. It's the entire think tank and the research pool and what we bring to the table that you don't want to miss. Angle of Elevation says, "Why spend $1 billion for a satellite when you can do it for 33,000? This is probably a test to see what people believe." Yeah, that was sort of my take. But then I look at the symbolism here, and if you look at it close up, it looks exactly like a TIE fighter. This is pinned on my Twitter account, Real Tim Osman, and positioned as it is below the balloon, it looks like a TIE fighter coming out of a Death Star, which is a direct reference to Star Wars, which was the derisive name for SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, Reagan's Star Wars thing, which has all really been recycled with Space Force. Trump has really just been, in so many ways, a lot of recycling. By the way, we have spent a lot of time talking about Damar Hamlin. We've been talking about the number 3 and the hearts and how this even tied into Tyree Nichols and this constant reference to the heart. Well, here is Kendrick Lamar wins Best Rap Performance for The Heart, Part 5 at the Grammys. This is very significant. If you're not familiar with Kendrick Lamar's work, there was the Mr. Morale and the is it High Steppers? There's an album where he's got a song where he morphs. The face is a deep fake, and he turns into Kanye West. He turns into Will Smith. He turns into OJ. And yeah, Kendrick Lamar's The Heart Part 5 video deepfake. So the video I'm referencing is actually the one he got the award for. And again, he turns into OJ. He turns into Kanye West. He turns into Nipsey Hussle. And again, Nipsey Hussle, if you recall, dies at 33. The whole thing was framed like the death of Jesus right around Easter season, represented with the crown of thorns. Kanye West wore the crown of thorns, did the Jesus thing for his Sunday ceremonies. He did the whole Christ imagery for the Rolling Stones cover when he did Coachella. Will Smith, O.J. Simpson, I mean, it's an interesting mix. Again, this was a video where Kendrick Lamar becomes O.J. Simpson, Kanye West. This is some kind of message. On the cover of this album, he has a crown of thorns. And he's, so I'm referencing this constant refrain to this black Christ. And it's been referenced with Nipsey, with Kanye, with him. And even more recently, I've been pointing out instances of this. and it's not insignificant. We're talking about, when we say Christ, even with Damar Hamlin, we're talking about the ritualistic dying and resurrecting sun god, which is represented as Hiram Abiff within the Masonic context. So my point here, Kendrick Lamar gets an award for a song called The Heart Part 5, and I'll look into that more in the future here. Best Duo, Kim Petras and Sam Smith perform a song called Unholy, and this is probably going to be talked about a lot tomorrow because it's just more mainstream devil worship.
So we can get back, but we don't know that he's getting high.
I mean, what can you read into it? You know, demons, hell, woman in a cage, like a big cube dancing around the devil. Maybe it means something deeper. I'm not sure. I'll look into it. Going through some comments, Jake the A-hole says, I initially thought it was a cover story for the ISS or Satelloon coming down, but now I think it's a scripted psyop beginning to end. Yeah, there's a few media tie-ins. Let's go ahead and dig up some of these, because there are some things in here. And look, here's something else that I have to point out. The Westworld Season 3 intro, I believe, references what I call the Metascript. That we live in a very scripted reality, sports, entertainment, politics, all of it. And our history is scripted. And Season 3 begins with this message here. And this is the one that was released right after COVID was declared, and you can see the obvious corona symbol in it. You even see there's plenty here. It looks to be an impaled person on the World Trade Tower, which looks exactly like a syringe. And again, the syringe comes from the Greek word syrinx, which means pan, flute. Think pandemic, god of panic. But anyway, it was a panic-demic. It was an epidemic or a pandemic of hypochondria. People were simply, it was a mind virus in many ways. But look here, this is from the intro. You see the corona symbol, and it says, history has an author, a system. And this is referring to, I would say, the big script. And they had to initiate the system. The Westworld's going to burn down because they're becoming sentient. It says, history has an author and a system, but there is, quote, someone they haven't accounted for, you. And my take on it is that all of this move towards censoring the internet lockdowns. In fact, there was a lockdown or a shutdown in Italy yesterday. It's to prepare us for the internet version of a pandemic. And you are the super spreader. You are the mind virus super spreader. And if you're not compelled to wear a mind mask, you're going to constantly reinfect people or infect people who are susceptible to mind viruses. The same argument that they used for the healthy super spreader needing to stay home because they can spread it to people with weak immune systems is being used for locking down your mind because people with weak mental immune systems, the mind aids that they've pretty much given the masses really through conditioning and training where they don't have an immune system. They need an injectable one. This is not going to be a real vax, but it's a mental vax. And of course, if you're not taking their MSM mind vax, well then of course you're a mind virus super spreader. Okay, going through some other notes here. Yes, they did shoot it down, and I find the whole thing very questionable. Now, APOC Shaker in our Discord server pointed this out, and this is one of the reasons why I think that we're looking at something more than just an accidental Satelloon CubeSat dipping too low. Before they even blew it up, he said, hey, look, it's starting to look like predictive programming in the movie Nope. You know, the movie Nope, Jordan Peele, about the UFO, the flying saucer thing. Well, at the end, it unfolds in this way, and it looks like a big Cthulhu-like thing in the sky, or a deflated opening, like a balloon blowing up. But as it falls to Earth, it actually kind of looked like something right out of the movie Nope. If you haven't seen Nope, it's about pretty much a UFO flying saucer thing. Not much more I can add there without giving you spoilers, but it does seem like there's some predictive programming here, and this is how it works. Last year, Moonfall was out, and I pointed out, Moonfall is preparing us for space junk. Moonfall is preparing the masses to accept things falling from space with regularity. And then we'll have to have, space wars or space force defending us, like a new air defense, but it deals with satellites, and everyone's going to have it. Like whatever they're coming up with, they've been preparing us for it with many shows I can mention. But Moonfall in particular, which coincidentally happens to have a savior who's a scientist, who looks like the savior in the movie Don't Look Up, which also has connotations to Nope, which if you look at the cover of the movie Nope, they're told don't look up, because if you look at it, I'm talking about the UFO thing, it'll basically suck you up through its eye. So the Don't Look Up connection is here. We're talking about the movie Moonfall having the protagonist who happens to be 33 looking exactly like the character Leonardo DiCaprio plays in Don't Look Up. There's a connection here. But anyway, Nope. In fact, someone has pointed out that you can connect the names of this director's movies, and there may be something in this. There's Get Out. There's Us, which some think might refer to the U.S. There's probably a deeper meaning here. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I'm pointing out that there is some kind of Nope connection to this balloon thing. The number 55 is something that's been showing up very much lately. I want to point this out really quick. It has to do with this Tyree Nichols, which has a lot of connections to MLK in 1968. They had the congregation after his funeral go to the place where MLK gave his speech about I've been to the mountaintop, which was 55 years ago. And this was after these protesters already shut down I-55. And I kind of saw this as maybe there's some kind of a connection here. And then the new Colin Kaepernick movie comes out, this new series called Killing County. And Killing County, if you look at the first, and I watched the first 2 episodes, it's pretty bad. It's basically like Sandy Hook level narrative building with all the victims telling their stories. It's just one-sided propaganda, agitprop. But I study this stuff, and when you watch the trailer, it opens up with this mention of these 55 officers. So the number 55 is associated with Colin Kaepernick's new film. It's associated with, here we go, this is again part of this documentary, I-55, and 55 years since MLK's assassination, and they have compared him to MLK. They've compared him to Rodney King. I mean, these psyops, one of the reasons why I'm comfortable calling them fake is that they are so obviously scripted. They're tied into every other little story. By the way, we're on the weekend before the Super Bowl, and this should be an interesting one. It's Super Bowl number 57, and there's a lot of mention, a lot of talk right now about this one in particular among those of us who are looking at the Metascript view. It happens to be Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and there's a lot of predictive programming pointing at some kind of a nuke, some kind of, like, here's an example of the predictive programming that people are pointing out. Here's Kendrick Lamar, and that whole thing was fake, with the guy named Neil standing. He's got a 33 on his back. Everybody else is kneeling. The whole thing was a ritual top to bottom. 3 days later, it comes to life. We've gone through this ad nauseum, but if you look at his phone, someone pointed this out. On his phone, it says 1032, but it also has the symbol for, it looks like, radiation, nuclear disaster. And the 1032 timestamp is the same one that Elon Musk has